Maya Hakham Melech Hamakaya Shir Yom HaShabbat Mizmor Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat Mizmor Shir Oh shit, mine.
The whole world is waiting to sing this song of Shabbos. The whole wide world is waiting to sing this song of Shabbos. The whole world is waiting to sing this song of Shabbos. The whole wide world is waiting to sing this song of Shabbat. And I am also waiting to sing this song of Shabbat. I am also waiting to sing this song of Shabbat. And I'm also waiting to sing this song of Shabbat. I am also waiting to sing this song of Shabbos. And I am also waiting to sing this song of Shabbos. I am also waiting to sing this song of Shabbos. Hashem, Ono Hashem, Ki Ani Avdecho, Ono Hashem, Ono Hashem, Ki Ani Avdecho, Ani Avdecho, Ben Amosecho, Ani Avdecho, Ben Amosecho, Ani Avdecho, Ben Amosecho, Pitav Dal Moisei. Kol hamasim, Baruch u'mevayrach, Befi kol haneshomot, Yovod lai v'tuvai, Ha'imolei ha'olam, Dasos v'unot, Sai v'vimaydai, Ha'am is going, Al-Chayes HaKodesh, B'nei Hedar B'choy, Al-Hamerkobo, Tuzo Misha, Alifne V'chizai, Chesed Rachamim, Molech V'aydai, Aydavai V'mei Ayrais, Shemoro Eloheinu, Yitzoram B'das, V'vino V'askel, Yoavayach Gul,
Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome everybody to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. Can you guys all hear me? Let's just do a quick sound check. I think everything's set up the way it's meant to be set up. Let's see. Remember here? Yeah, that. Okay, I think that's the way I did it. Okay, quick sound check. You guys can all hear me? Okay, great. The StreamYard password. There shouldn't be a password, Phil. I don't know of any password. You just go on there, and then I'll see you, and then then you should be allowed right on. I didn't change any settings to not allow somebody on. Try again and let me know. So, okay, we're gonna definitely have some internet problems this week because the search I've been using for close to a year now. The link, I'll give you the link. 1 second. 1 second. Talking about links. So the Starlink, which I've been using now for I think close to a year, and which is great. So I live out in the middle of nowhere. It's gone down. There was a storm about 2 days ago, and it's gone down. So I've had to revert to the old Wi-Fi, which is old early 2000s technology, ADSL technology. So I have a feeling. I mean, I don't have a feeling. I know we're gonna have some internet problems. So we'll just have to bear with them. Maybe I'll even at a certain point have to turn off the camera or something like that. But if you hear any severe internet problems occurring, if you can't hear for a long period of time, or it's kind of like going in and out, which is typical with this old, oh, there we go. I see it happening right there. Typical with this old internet, then let me know. Okay. But that's all I could do. I've been trying to troubleshoot it over the past day or two, but it hasn't worked. So I guess I'll give it another day, and then I'll have to get in contact with Elon Musk personally. You know, since he and I are BFFs, I'll speak to him and have him ship me out a new one immediately. Okay. So all that being said, we're going to be doing Parashat Tzav. We're in the beginning of the book of Leviticus, and I'm actually going to go back. I think I'm going to start with chapter 3 rather than with chapter 6, and I'll explain why in a little while. But before we do, let's talk about what's going on in the world. So I was listening just before to an Alex Jones rant, and I'm a big fan of Alex Jones. I've been listening to him for over 10 years, and I don't agree with everything the guy says. It's clearly he have a sense, I think, of the importance of the nation of Israel in the world. But that's okay. He doesn't need to. It's not his job to. But that being said, I do agree. Love ya. Oh, that's Phil. I do agree with oh, Phil, you're actually in this time. Okay, I'm just gonna put you on mute. I do agree with a lot of what he said, and he was basically saying something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing here, along the lines of, the Jews in America, we let you in, we gave you a place of refuge, and now don't drag us in your garbage back in the Middle East. And I thought this was right on target, 100%. And I really think back to the Jewish experience in the United States of America, which is I don't know, 100 years now. I started coming, maybe a little bit more. I think my father's father came in 1921, so just about 100 years ago for him. And I think of the Jewish experience here and what we tried to accomplish and how it was doomed to failure ultimately. And this reminds me, I'll have to find it now. Let's see if I can find this. Atlantic, but you won't be able to see it on the Atlantic. You have to see it on one of these Atlantic article. Jewish Golden Age. It's behind a paywall on the Atlantic, but you can look around for other links which link to it, like they have copies of it. But this was called the Golden Age of American Jews is ending. Let me put it up on the screen. And let's see, is it behind the paywall? It's behind the paywall. Very briefly. So let's share screen. There we go. So it's on the Atlantic, a nice left-wing magazine, but they do put out some good articles, and it's called The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending by Franklin Foer. And he really kind of hits it right on target. At least his observations are. I don't think his conclusions are, because he's not religious, but his observations are right on target. Basically what he says is that the Jews, I'm paraphrasing here, but the Jews came to the United States of America, and especially after World War II, especially after the Holocaust, what they essentially wanted to do was transform America, or mold America into a nation that such basically liberalism was accepted. No chance whatsoever. Whoops. Here we go. There'd be no chance so ever of the Jews being attacked, and the way they decided to institute that was to adopt these super liberal causes, to adopt and to promote these super liberal causes, because the Jews in America have been at the forefront of liberalism. They basically almost created liberalism in the United States of America, as a way to kind of disarm everybody so that they wouldn't ultimately attack the Jews, right? So help the blacks, help the these, help the others, help the poor people, allow refugees in from anywhere in the world, allow immigrants in from anywhere in the world. This liberalism, right? And that was an attempt, once again, to create, such a, shall we say, an accepting society, that society could never come back and sting the Jews. Well, the whole thing was a failure. It was doomed to failure from the very beginning. In fact, any state of the people of Israel in a ultimately doomed to failure, because it must be by its very nature temporary, right? This is the exile, no matter where we are, whether we're in Germany, whether we're in the United States of America, whether we're in Portugal, whether we're in Turkey, whether we're in Egypt, it doesn't matter. It must be ultimately doomed to failure. And this is because it's a punishment to be in exile, right? The blessing is to be in the land of Israel. The curse is to be outside of the land of Israel, to be in the diaspora. So then the question becomes, well, how does it become a punishment? If it's going to end, it has to end some way or another, okay? And usually the way it ends is that we come in there into that country. The country generally, a lot of times, welcomes us in or invites us in. I could give many examples throughout history. So maybe a classic example would be after the Jews in Spain in 1492. The Turkish said, "Wow, these disappeared. Back up. These Spaniards are fools. They kicked out the Jews. The Jews are responsible for such innovation. They have such intelligence. They're such innovators, etc." So the Turks, they literally sent ships to the shores of Spain to pick up the Jews and bring them to Turkey. Okay, so that's the way that happens a lot throughout history. We're kicked out of one place and another place invites us in. Look at the United States of America. I mean, I could speak from, I'd say, personal experience, but from the experience of of my family, of my grandparents. 3 of my 4 grandparents were born in Eastern Europe, and the 4th one was born in New Jersey, but both of her parents were born in Eastern Europe, right? So I guess it depends how you count it. I guess second generation American, or was a second generation American. So I'm not in America right now. But you know, what happened is that life became pretty much unbearable in Eastern Europe. There were a lot of conflicts going on in Eastern Europe, and this led to a lot of, you know, anti-Semitism, pogroms, and ultimately to the Holocaust. And so the Jews had to leave. And as they left, there was a new place that was arising as a kind of haven where all the Jews were going. That was the United States of America, and in particular New York, which is where I grew up. I grew up in the suburbs of New York, right, which is just a complete. I mean, it is just a complete Sodom and Gomorrah right now. It's just a collapsing, decaying. I hope I never have to see it again as long as I live, but I might have to, unfortunately, go back and visit at least. So, but at any rate, the point is that a new place opened up, and each time, I don't know about each time, but I could speak from, you know, experience that America was the promise, and this was considered a stop. Most doing this crazy thing. Forgot about Israel. They didn't even think about Israel. America was the final stop. Okay, and that was going to be it. And because America is the land of the free, and they're going to accept the Jews, even though they didn't always accept the Jews, right? We have the famous case where Roosevelt refused to bomb the tracks of the concentration camps, where he rejected the Jews from coming to the United States of America and turned some ships back. I think there was one famous ship. I can't remember offhand. I have to look it up. But so the Jews weren't always such a, I mean, the United States of America was not always such a haven, but we, stupid Jews, we built it into this idea in our head that the United States is the ultimate destination, it's the ultimate country, and it is the ultimate haven. And we did not only by seeing or believing that it accepted, you know, that it represented freedom, which it did to a large degree, but then we came there and we tried to transform it even more into our image, so that it would be more of a or more of a haven for us than it had been, you know, before the Jewish influence. And that's what we Jews have been doing in the United States of America for the past 100 years, is basically trying to transform the country into our image, so that it, you know, using our significant intelligence, using our blessings from Yahweh, you know, as the chosen people, we have, you know, special powers, you know, that even we can't understand sometimes. You know, we've been using all of this koach, all of this strength, you know, physical, intellectual, spiritual strength, and tried to transform the United States of America into something of our image. And in doing so, you know, or we did this essentially by adopting, not just adopting, but promoting liberalism. Liberalism essentially didn't exist in the United States in any way, shape, or form, for the most part, until the Jews came to until the Jews came to the United States of America, and they kind of adopted it and started with Delano Roosevelt. It may be a very simplistic history of the United States, but good enough for now. Okay, so so we transformed fundamentally the United States of America, not with the interests of the United States of America at heart. Okay, though every Jew in America will claim up and down, you know, that he's an American and he's more loyal to him. He's, you know, is loyal to him, or, you know, first loyal to America and then loyal to Israel, or first loyal to America and then loyal to the Jewish people. I know for a fact that that's not the case. Okay, I grew up Jewish. I grew up surrounded by Jews, and I know that's not the case. They may say it, we may say it, but at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, it's not the truth. It's not the truth. The Jews are first and foremost loyal to the Jewish people, as they should be. But let's not pretend. I mean, we had to pretend, I guess, or the Jews had to pretend otherwise, you know, to seem like good patriotic Americans, to be accepted in America, to allow it to continue to be this haven for the Jews. But it was this the concept that we came up with, right? Back in the old country, I guess there we go. The Jews came up with the concept essentially of communism, to you know, make the world a better place, to make a, you know, a kinder and gentler Russia, or a kinder and gentler Eastern Europe. And that ultimately backfired, you know, in a big way. That ultimately led to the creation of the Soviet Union, and Judaism was essentially eradicated under the Soviet Union, right? I mean, all religion was eradicated under the Soviet Union. So then when we came to the United States of America, the big idea for Jews became liberalism, okay? Signified or exemplified by organizations today such as the ADL, such as the Liberal Democrats, and it started off maybe really nice. FDR, the New Deal with FDR, JFK. The Jews loved JFK. The Jews loved the various liberal presidents over the years. But it was really ultimately an idea that was doomed to failure, and now it is failing, and now it has poisoned the United States of America so much. To the point, I can get rid of this article right now, or I'll leave it up there. So read that article, find it. I don't know how you find it, but find it. Okay, it has poisoned the society of the United States of America so much that society is now collapsing, and it's turning back on the Jews, as it was always destined to. Okay, so one of the ideas of liberalism is, just accept everybody. It doesn't matter where they come from, what their background is. Everybody's exactly the same. Everybody's equal. And really, what that did was create what I like, what only I like to call, but what one could call a multicultural hellhole, because you have all of these different ethnicities, you have all of these different cultures, which would be wonderful back in their own country, where it's a monolithic culture. And I don't hate any cultures, except maybe when they're fighting Israel. But I don't inherently hate any cultures, right? But when you mix them all together, it doesn't create a utopia. It creates a Gehenna. It creates a hell on earth, because ethnicities it's kind of like the rule of good fences make good neighbors. It's great if you want to hang out. I'm just going to pick a random ethnicity with Indians, and you go to India, and that's their place, that's their land. That's wonderful. You can go, you can make Indian friends, you can eat Indian food, enjoy Indian culture. I have a friend who I know here who does business in India, loves going to Mumbai, goes back all the time, loves India, loves Indian culture, loves Indian food, has plenty of Indian friends. That's wonderful. Okay. Same with Japanese, the same with African, Black African culture, etc. When you mix them all together and then say we're all going to get together along, or we're all going to get along together as one big happy family, it doesn't work. There's a flaw in that concept. It cannot work. And the reason it cannot work is, and this is the same reason that Judaism is such a mess right now. The reason it cannot work is because at the end of the day, blood is thicker than water. Should be, right? Your immediate family is more important to you than your extended family. Your extended family is more important to you than your clan. Your clan is more important. We don't have clans in the United States. Your extended family is more important to you than, let's say, all the Jews in New York. Okay, all the Jews in New York are more important to you than all the Jews in the United States of America. All the Jews in the United States of America are more important to you than, let's say, the non-Jews, the Chinese people living in Flushing, Queens, near where I grew up, they're, very nice people. Some of them are jerks, but at any rate, the Jewish people as a whole are more important to you than even a Chinese person who's your neighbor, okay? Because blood is thicker than water, and you cannot take all of these different bloodlines, all of these different races and ethnicities, mix them all together and expect to have a utopia. It just doesn't work. It cannot work, because the way that God created the world is he split to nations, he split to races, he split the descendants of ethnicities and cultures and nations, and he gave each of those nations a land of their own. Sometimes he expanded their land, sometimes he contracted their land, sometimes he destroyed the nation completely, took the land away from them completely. But at any given time, there always was, traditionally in history, with the exception of maybe some of the big empires like the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, even there, because people just couldn't move around so much back in the day. They didn't have the money and they didn't have the means of transportation. Each ethnicity, each race, each clan, each tribe had its own land, had its own culture, had its own language. And this idea of mixing them all together to create some kind of global, culture with above which flies the flags of McDonald's and Coca-Cola and the United States of America, not really the United States of America, but the Jewish liberal influenced new United States of America that was created essentially by the Jews when they came to the U.S. to save their own asses. Right? It doesn't work. It causes disgusting cesspool. Okay, and if there is one place in perhaps the world, or at least in the United States of America, which was the laboratory for this experiment, it's the place where I grew up, and that was New York. Okay, and I experienced this firsthand. I never went to a private school in my life until I went to university. I grew up in the New York City public schools. Okay, PS 41, junior high school 158, Bayside High School. These were the schools that I grew up in. Okay, I was surrounded by, in my classes, ethnicities of all types. I had Chinese people in my class, I had black people in my class, I had Koreans in my class. You name it, they were in my class. Okay, and I liked them. I got along great with them. I had wonderful friends. Okay, I had wonderful friends, and I really enjoyed having this mix of different people, in my class. But at the end of the day, if it comes down to one of them, or it comes down to a family member, even a Jew on the other side of the country who I've never met, okay, it's going to be the Jew first, because that's my blood. Okay, that's my flesh and blood, even though I've never met the person. Okay, so this experiment of mixing all the ethnicities together and saying there's no such thing, there's no such thing as race, there's no such thing as ethnicity, there's no such thing as different cultures. We're all going to mix together as one big happy family. It just doesn't work. If you live next door, okay, if I'm Jewish and I live next door to a Jew on one hand, on one side of on one side of me, a black person on the other side of the street, and a Chinese person across the street, I may become very good friends with the black person. I may become very good friends with the Chinese person. My best friend in second best friend in high school was a Korean. We were great friends, right? But at the end of the day, okay, if it comes push to shove, my true loyalty is going to be to my own people, my own flesh and blood, and that's going to be the Jew, as it should be. Just like if it came to shove, my true loyalty would be to my nuclear family before it would be to my extended family, and so on and so forth. It's like concentric circles. Okay, so it's disaster, and it was ultimately, there was no way other than the fact that it would end up as a disaster. So we Jews, we came to the United States of America. We said we're going to create a new concept, a new idea. Maybe it's an old concept, but in our lifetime, a new concept. We're going to bring everybody together. We're going to let everybody in. We're going to pretend everybody's 100% equal, that all races have the same, same abilities, same skills, the same level of intelligence, the same types of intelligence. And we're just going to pretend there's no differences between any of the different groups. And we're all going to live together as one big happy family. And this is going to create a situation where the Jews are going to have a haven, a golden age in the United States of America. And again, the boilerplate for this was New York. And I saw it firsthand. The experiments that were tried, you could see it to this day. If you pick up the New York Times, you will see article after article after article of this. I don't even know how to explain it unless you grew up in New York. It's something almost might be foreign to you, but if you grew up in New York, you'll understand it immediately. This idea of, oh wow, we all live in the same neighborhood, and they call it a community, and we're all part of the same. I don't know. Let's say you live in, I don't know, pick a neighborhood. A Borough Park. Oh, that's a bad example because all Jews there. Let's say you live in, Canarsie, Brooklyn, or something like that. Oh, we're all, it doesn't matter if you're Chinese or white or black or Korean or whatever. We're all part of the same community. We're all part of the same family. And look how this one gets along, and look how this one gets along with that one. And they almost want to create this artificial family, and they promote this idea, and it just doesn't work. It's just fake. It's fake. And in fact, people in New York will deliberately look for these, I don't even know how to explain it, these special interactions with other people, because they want to buy into this lie that everyone is one big happy family. And these things just generally don't work. Okay. I don't know if I'm explaining that too well. If you grew up in New York, you might know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. Anyway, it's a disaster, and now it's all falling apart. Because what do we have now? We have a situation where a lot of things are going on, but one thing that's going on is we have a situation where this attitude, instead of creating one big happy family, all it's done is brought a whole bunch of people together, squeezed them together. It's almost like a nuclear bomb where you put some critical mass together, and it's an explosion. Okay, because it's not natural for people from different races, ethnicities, etc., to treat each other as if they're family. It doesn't work, and they don't. Okay, so what ends up happening is what always was going to end up happening is everyone is loyal to their own type, their own bloodline, their own tribe, their own people. And now these people are competing for limited resources, and everything reverts back to tribal warfare, as it always was, and it always has. This is why this was always a disaster from the beginning. So the Jews, with their wonderful attempt at this experiment, this very naive, lovely, but very naive, very stupid experiment, it's now all falling back on our faces. And not only is the United States of America at this point a very safe haven for Jews, for white people, for pretty much anyone, but it's only going to get much worse, because it's almost like if you take a cat and a dog, and you put them in the same room, unless they grew up together, and you say, oh, there's no difference between a cat and a dog, they're both the same, they're going to get along, we're going to make one big happy family of cats, and it ain't going to work. It doesn't work, and it can't work. So the Jews, in their very attempt to create a haven for themselves, actually to create a utopia for themselves, okay, with their naive view of creating this, this liberalism, creating one big happy family, they actually created a hell for themselves and for everybody else, which is now becoming clear, especially since October 7th. We see how much anti-Semitism in the United States of America is, coming out of the ground, out of nowhere, and it's ultimately going to end in destruction for the Jews in the United States of America. Does that mean that it's going to have the same end as it did in Germany, where all the Jews get killed? It could, but that hasn't always been the end result of when a country has decided, we've had enough of these Jews. Often it's been pogroms, it's been expulsions, it's been stuff along those lines. It doesn't always have to end in an outright Holocaust, but it's definitely going to end in something, one way or another, because the United States is imploding in on itself, and it was always in God's plan. It was always in God's plan. Paul, I'm going to mute you. It was always in God's. Okay. Can't unmute your guest because they chose to mute themselves. It was always in God's plan for this to fail, because we as Jews, we as the people of Israel, were never supposed to find a safe haven in any country other than the land of Israel. When we're in exile, when we're in the diaspora, it can only end in one way. It has always ended in one way, and that is either our expulsion, our destruction, violence against us, etc. Okay. I've worked farms, cats and dogs can be introduced into. Of course, I've had cats and dogs together. I grew up with a cat and a dog. I was just using that as an example. Okay, I was just using that as an example. Okay, so as an illustration. All right. So that's what I have to say. Read this article. The golden age of America is ending. So this person, he's an excellent observer, but he's a poor interpreter. Okay, he observes the situation correctly, but he comes to the wrong conclusions. And the right conclusion is that by attempting to create some kind of utopia, we actually ended up by going against the will of God. We thought we knew better than God. We're going to create this utopia by having everybody just get along as one big happy family. And instead, that's not the way God set up the world. It was always meant to end in disaster, and is now ending in disaster. It is now in the process of ending in disaster, and it will end with the Jews either being expelled from the United States of America, or being killed, or pogroms, or something along those lines. There's no doubt about it. Okay, and I've been saying this actually for decades, and 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, people would laugh at me as if I'm a complete fool. And now they're not laughing so much. They can now sense that the end is near for the Jews in the United States of America, because the United States of America is going to get. I mean, this election, 2024, between Trump and Biden, this is it, man. This is like, whatever happens, there's going to be violence as a result of whatever happens. There's going to be violence as a result of the 2024 election. Okay, if Biden gets in, then the right wing is going to say, that's it. We got screwed out of our guy once again. It was unfair. There was cheating. The Democrats cheated, and they did cheat. They have cheated many different ways, and to get their guy in, and it could result. Honestly, it could spark a civil war. It really could. And if the Republicans get in, well, we already know what the left wing is capable of doing. Black Lives Matter, etc. Okay, so the end is nigh for the Jews in the United States of America. Jewish people are starting to sense it, and some of them, maybe a couple, are starting to get out. But we're a stubborn lot, and especially the older generation, they can't see. They still have this idea that the United States of America is the ultimate safe haven for Jews. Okay, I've only said about a fraction of what I could say, but I will say this last thing. God, Yahweh, builds into everything we do its end. Okay, the end is already built into the beginning, and sometimes things don't become clear until the end of a thing. But once that becomes clear, you realize that the seeds were there. The seeds were deliberately implanted from the very beginning of a thing. Okay, so the Jews ending their stay in the United States of America one way or another. Okay, that's the end. And but if you look, it's clear that the seeds for that were planted in the very beginning. And the only solution for us is not liberalism. It's not communism as it was back in Eastern Europe. It's not liberalism as we adopted in the United States of America, where every Jew, worshipped FDR basically as a god from that generation. None of these things work. The only thing that works for us is to reject the stubbornness of our heart, to reject these false philosophies, to come back to the land of Israel, to the Torah of Israel, and to Yahweh, the God of Israel, in the land of Israel, with the Torah of Israel. That's the only thing that will ever work. And sadly, we found this out the hard way many times, and we're in the process of finding that out the hard way once again. So that's what I have to say. Again, I could go into this on a much more detailed level, but that is what I have to say. So Desiree obviously clearly disagrees with me on many levels. What happens to all those like me with no people, no religion, and no culture? Well, you do have a people and a religion and a culture. So again, someone who's not an Israelite, who's not a native-born Israelite, there are two ways to join themselves to the nation of Israel. Okay, so the less drastic way is to become what I call a nilweh. That is the closest equivalent to rabbinical that exists to it in rabbinical Judaism, and I almost hesitate to say it. It's a horrible analogy, but it's kind of like a Noahide on steroids. So the rabbis believe that if someone keeps the quote unquote 7 Noahide laws, which they basically made up, then that person is a righteous Gentile, and that person is basically doing his job as a Gentile. Well, that I don't see it that way. What I see is someone who's a nilweh is basically keeping much more of the Torah and is celebrating the holidays along with Israel, is going to visit Israel, is when the time comes, if meat sacrifices are reinstated, which I personally don't think they will, and I personally hope they won't be, that's a whole other story, then is going and sacrificing animals to Yahweh on the Temple Mount, is basically joined to the nation of Israel from the outside. A friend of mine or people have called it an ally or supporter. That's a nilweh. Okay. Then the next higher level, what I like to call a black belt in joining the nation of Israel, is what's called a ger. That's where you're all in. Okay. That's where you basically say, that's it. I'm ready. You say what Ruth did. Okay. I'm ready to leave my people. Okay. I'm ready to where you go, I shall go. And where you sleep, I shall sleep, and your God is my God, and your people are my people. When someone could say that and mean it, then they are a ger, and that means picking your butt up from wherever you are, Japan, the United States of America, the moon, and coming and living in the land of Israel. And I won't say now, because even the Jews are not all living in the land of Israel, but knowing that when that right time comes, that you want to live in one place and one place only, and that's the land of Israel. If a person can actually honestly say that they want to come live among Israel in the land of Israel when the time comes, and they're essentially ready to put the people of Israel before any of their other loyalties to any other nations, then I would say that such a person would be a ger. Okay, a ger is part of the nation of Israel. They are in the outermost concentric circle of the nation of Israel, but they were within that circle of the nation of Israel. Okay, but I always like to say, that's someone who is a black belt in Judaism. That's someone who's coming from the outside and decides, I don't want to just associate myself with the people of Israel. I want to become a black belt. I want to go all the way, and I want to actually join the people of Israel. That takes a huge amount of sacrifice. We see the sacrifice that Ruth made as an example when she came, when she went back with Naomi to the land of Israel from Moab. We see the incredible sacrifice she made, and we can talk about that in a second. But that's the level of sacrifice that a ger has to make and has to be willing to make. Someone who's not ready to make that sacrifice, that's fine. The other nations have to be populated, right? People are allowed to stay loyal to their nations. It's great if a Japanese person wants to remain Japanese, if an American wants to remain American, if a Brazilian wants to remain Brazilian, and support Israel from the outside. Then that's the level of what I would call a nilweh. Again, a nilweh is kind of like a Noahide on steroids. It means basically you're keeping as many of the, or I would say most of the mitzvot of the Torah, because I think most of the mitzvot actually apply to all people. I'll give you an example. The laws of kashrut, I think, actually ultimately apply to all people. It's voluntary for people who are not Israelite. It's mandatory for people who are Israelite. And many of the other laws apply to all people. Certainly, most of the Ten Commandments do, right? Do not murder. Even keeping the Shabbat, I would say, can apply to all people, right? So that is the level of a nilweh. That's basically, I've met many, many people like this, and they're wonderful, amazing people. And I found over the years that it's a disservice to tell them that they're gerim, to say that they're converts, because it's not true. It's a disservice to them, and it's a disservice to everybody. It just doesn't pan itself out, because I've seen over the years many people who say, "Oh, I'm a convert. I've converted to Judaism. I'm a Karaite now." And at the end of the day, what they really are is a nilweh. There's someone who really wants to live for the rest of their lives. I'll give the example of, I don't know, I always use Arizona for some reason. They want to live in Arizona. Their first loyalty is to their own country, the United States of America. They're proud to be an American, but they love the people of Israel. They love the Torah of Israel. They love the God of Israel. They accept the God of Israel as the only God. They accept the people of Israel as the chosen people. The people chosen by Yahweh to have the special covenant with him, to be basically the leading nation, his representatives on the face of the earth. But they don't want to move to the land of Israel. They don't want to reject their own people. They want to stay for the rest of their lives in Arizona. They want their kids to grow up in Arizona. They want their grandkids to grow up in Arizona. They wave the American flag. They're Americans first and foremost. And that's great. That's wonderful. Okay. That is the level of a nilweh. So, Torah doesn't ever mention all this division, so who makes this up? It absolutely does. It absolutely does mention all of this division, without a doubt. None of this is being taken out of, is being invented, okay? The Torah absolutely speaks about what a ger is, that someone who's not an Israelite is not part of the nation of Israel, but that at the end of the day, at the end of days, all the world will be loyal to, or all the world will accept Yahweh as their God. Does that mean that all of the world is going to come live in Jerusalem? No, of course not. It just means that the various nations are going to wake up. Whoever's left of the various nations are going to wake up, and they're going to accept Yahweh. It absolutely does. One thing that the Torah does is it makes distinctions, definitions. Everyone, I always like to say that in Torah, everyone knows their name, rank, and serial number. You know exactly who you are, where you stand, and where you come from. And to say otherwise, it's not true. You can see it throughout the Torah. Why do you think lineage is such an important thing in the Torah? Why is it mentioned? Why is everyone who's mentioned, their lineage, specifically their male lineage, is given? Why is someone who's a Kohen? Why is that? Why is that only the male descendants of Aaron? Okay, someone who's from the tribe of Dan, they could dream all their life of being a Kohen, of being a priest of Yahweh at the temple of Yahweh. They never can be. They could be the most knowledgeable person in the world about the sacrificial system, about purity and impurity. They can never ever be a priest in the temple of Yahweh. Okay. Go home, but I am a woman and I'm crippled. I can't go alone. I understand. Jews, and if the Jews are then, the Torah speaks about this. Look about the laws of the Gerim and look at what it means to be a Ger. Okay. Anyway, I've done many studies on these different distinctions. They're mentioned explicitly in the Torah, with the possible exception of Nidweh. That's a name I gave to it, but it's implied, I think, in many places. I can give some, maybe we have time. All right. So anyway, that's what I have to say. But Desiree, if you accept Yahweh as your God, if you accept the people of Israel as the chosen people of Yahweh, who are in a special covenant with Yahweh, if you accept the Torah of Moshe as the word of God, then you are, at the very least, who knows, maybe you're one of those people who want to live in the, that's what we're saying. I really want to be among the people of Israel, because that's what a ger means. The word ger comes from the underlying gimel, and it means, it's usually translated as sojourn. In modern Hebrew, if you say I live somewhere, like I live in Tel Aviv, ani gar b'Tel Aviv. I live in Tel Aviv. It means to come and dwell. at least semi-permanently. In the case of a ger sometimes translated as stranger, these are all very good translations. What it basically means in the context of Israel is it means someone who comes from a foreign nation, moves to the land of Israel, and says, "This is it. This is my new home. I'm staying here, and I'm not leaving." That is what a ger is. Okay, sojourner. Sometimes it's translated as a stranger. Sometimes it's translated as convert, or in the biblical translations, but colloquially it's translated as a convert. But that's what it means. It means like Ruth. Ruth is the classic example. Okay, Ruth had all the reason in the world not to follow Naomi from Moab back to the land of Israel. She had nothing waiting for her. That's what Naomi says. Naomi says to her two daughters-in-law, to Orpah and to Ruth, says, there's nothing for me. Okay, I'm too old to have any more children, and even if I did, are you going to wait for those children to grow up so you can marry them? I have nothing to give you. Don't follow me. Go back. Come to your senses. There's nothing waiting for you there. So now Orpah basically says, "Yep, I got it. I got the hint. Later, I'm out of here." Right? She made the logical decision. That's what anyone who thinks logically about the situation would say. Right? Naomi's right. My mother-in-law is right. Her son, my husband, my ex-husband is dead. I have nothing waiting for me in the land of Israel. It's a foreign people. It's a foreign nation. I have nothing there. Naomi is not going to give me any more children for me to marry. I'm going to be just a stranger in a strange land. But Ruth, there was something deeper, something that made her defy, that was deeper than logic, because logic would tell her, go back home, go back to Moab. That's where you have a future. But sometimes we know that there's a gut feeling, that there's a faith, that there's something that is deeper than just logic, that just makes us say, this is what I have to do. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I don't know how this is all going to work out. I just know that I have to do this, even if it defies logic. And that is the essence of a ger, and that's what Ruth was. Okay, did nothing on the surface. Okay, she had nothing waiting for her in Israel, but something deep inside her said, This is where I belong. This is what my soul is telling me to do." And so she followed Naomi back to the land of Israel, and then Yahweh was kind to her, and the rest is history. Right? She ultimately gave birth, or her line gave birth to King David. Okay, all right. All right. Okay, so Paul asks a very good question. I've discussed this many times. Ruth was already married to a Jew. She didn't convert them to marry her first husband. So the way that the Torah works, and I could show you mitzvot about this, and uh, the way that it works is this. So yes, when Ruth was a woman, always takes on the status of, when she's a child, when she's a girl, she takes on the status of her father. So if her father was Moabite, which obviously he was, we don't know his name, then Ruth was a Moabite. When Ruth married Machlon, when Ruth married the son of Naomi, Naomi was an Israelite, Machlon was an Israelite. Then at that point, Ruth became an Israelite. The internet. Then at that point, Ruth became an Israelite. You're right. Or she attained the status of Israelite because she was now brought into the household of an Israelite as a wife, and she became an Israelite. However, when Machlon died and there were no children, and they did not have any children, then Ruth reverts to the status of Moabite. And I could show you one mitzvah in the Torah which points this out, and there are many others which imply it. Okay, so Ruth reverted to the status of Moabite. If she had had a child with Machlon, then she would have retained her status as Israelite. But she didn't have a child with Machlon. She was childless, and she now reverts to the status of Moabite. So yeah, she had a taste of what it meant to be Israelite, but now she reverts to the status of Moabite. But there was something inside her which said, I have to follow Naomi back to Israel. And then she didn't become an Israelite again. With a woman, it works differently from a man. A woman has the status, or attains the status, of whatever household she belongs to. There's no such thing as a lone wolf as if you're a woman. Okay, or if you are a lone wolf, then as a woman, then in traditional societies, you're severely disadvantaged. It's very difficult, to not be part of a household, for anybody, not only for a woman, for a male as well. Okay, so when Ruth decided to follow Naomi back to Israel, she still did not have the status of Israelite. She had the hope that she would now be somehow grafted into Israel. And it was only when Boaz married, when Boaz decided to accept the inheritance of Machlon as his own, basically to be the redeemer, the Goel of Machlon's inheritance, then as the second or the first in line to redeem Machlon's inheritance points out, if you take Machlon's inheritance, that includes also Ruth the Moabite, you'll have to take her as wife. And Boaz accepts that, and now Boaz takes Ruth as wife, meaning he takes Ruth into his own household, and at that point, Ruth once again becomes an Israelite because she's now part of Boaz's household. And Boaz being an Israelite, now Ruth once again becomes an Israelite, and this time she stays. Right, she has children, and ultimately she is her line gives birth to her line with Boaz gives birth to ultimately to King David. Right, so that's the way it works. Okay, that's why you also have the law that I'm speaking about, by the way, which makes this explicit is, and I always forget chapter and verse, I'd have to look it up, but it says that if the daughter of a Kohen, or when the daughter of Kohen is growing up in her father's house, she's allowed to eat the Kodesh. The Kodesh is the holy foods, the foods that are dedicated to the temple, which are ultimately given to the Kohanim, right? If they're not burned on the altar, or if they're grains, if whatever's not burnt on the altar is given only to the Kohanim. It's called Kodesh. It's the holy foods, and only Kohanim, and in some cases Levites, but in this case Kohanim are allowed to eat of the Kodesh. Okay, so if she's a little girl in her father's house, she's allowed to eat the holy foods. Okay, in her father's house, and her father's a Kohen, she's allowed to eat the holy foods. And then it says that if she goes out and marries someone who's not a Kohen, it doesn't say this explicitly, but that's the implication there. If she goes out and marries someone who's not a Kohen, she's no longer allowed to eat of the holy food. So let's say she's a daughter of a Kohen and she marries someone from the tribe of Zebulun. Okay, she's now a Zebulunite. She can no longer eat of the holy foods. Okay, but it says that if she is divorced or if her husband dies and they don't have any children and she goes back to live in her father's house as she did when she was a child, when she was a little girl, then she can once again eat of the holy foods. In other words, she's now her husband has either died or divorced her. She's left with nothing. It says explicitly she didn't have any children. Now she goes back. She's nothing in life, right? She's no children. She's no family of her own. She's just a lone wolf. So where's she going to go? She goes back to daddy. She runs back to daddy. She goes back to her father's house, and it says she goes back and lives as it was when she was a girl. Then once again, she can eat of the holy foods. She regains that status of being the daughter of a Kohen, or being I won't say Kohen, but being a daughter of a Kohen, being in a Kohenite clan, because she never had any children. She never established a household of her own. So now she goes back to joining her father's household, and now she can once again eat of the holy foods. Okay, so this shows the way the Torah's the attitude that the Torah has towards regarding how women are treated with regards to their status. They take on the status of whatever household they belong to. When they're a little girl, they have the status of their father. Whatever their father's status is, that's their status. If their father was a Kohen, then they are, I won't say Kohen because they're not actually priests, but they're in a Kohenite family. If their father is from the tribe of Asher, they're an Asherite. If the father is from the tribe of Benjamin, they're a Benjaminite. I like to say a Benjamite. And then if they go get married, let's say they get married, then they take on the status of their husband. As long as they're married, they take on the status of their husband. And then if they get divorced, or if their husband dies, if they've had a child with that husband, that kind of cements the relationship. Okay, that now there's a product, there's some result of that relationship. Then they retain that status. They retain the status of their husband. However, if they didn't have any children, and the husband either dies or divorces her, then she reverts and she goes back and lives in her father's house. Then she reverts to the status she had when she was a child. She reverts to the status of her father, whatever that was. And that's the way it works. The women join the nation of Israel, or women take on the status of whatever household they belong to. Their father has a child, and when they grow up, they take on the status of their husbands. Okay, so that's it. All right. So don't non-Jews have to complete a rabbinical conversion to immigrate to Israel? Yes. The answer to that is yes. It's constantly changing. I don't know. I can't keep up on all the laws. I know now you can even do a reform conversion to emigrate to Israel, but that's the laws of the state of Israel. I'm not talking about the laws of the state of Israel. You can do a reform conversion. I think now you can even do it in Israel, but you could basically do a reform conversion under whatever Reform congregations are recognized by the state of Israel, and then that will be enough to declare that you're Jew, that you're a convert, that you're a Jew to the state of Israel, and they will allow you to immigrate. So the answer to that is yes. Okay. And Desiree, yes, I tested. For sure. Okay. So there we go. So that's all that. So at any rate, how do we get off onto all of this? We were speaking about the mess that the Jews have made of America and ultimately for themselves. I was speaking about this article, which I highly, highly, highly recommend that you read, find it. If I could find it, if you go back, I don't know, somewhere, I found it on Drudge originally, maybe about almost a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. I found it on Drudge maybe a month ago, and he had a link to it that bypassed the firewall. I mean the paywall, and it was some internet archive link. So find it if you can. It's fascinating article. It's very long, very detailed, absolutely fascinating. If I have a chance later, maybe I'll try to find it and post it. And so yeah, we've made a mess of the United States. We as Jews have been at the forefront. We've been at the vanguard of every ridiculous liberal, liberal program or liberal, attempt. I don't know, can't find the right word, but every liberal movement. That's the word I was looking for. For at least 70 more, 70, yeah, 70, 80, 90 years, close to 100 years, and we have been responsible for making a mess out of the United States, and that mess from our own stupidity, our own stubbornness, our own naivety, rather than creating a nice safe haven for us in the United States, all it's done is come back to sting us, to bite us in the butt, as it always does, because it was never intended for us to stay in the United States of America. So the seed for that end of the Jews in the United States of America was already implanted in the very beginnings of our mentality when we came to the United States of America. That was God's doing. That's the way he makes sure that we don't feel too comfortable in the lands of the diaspora. Okay. So that's that. With that all said, let's go on to this week's talk. We are supposed to be in Leviticus. How do I get rid of Phil? No offense, Phil, but you're just staring me right in the face there, and you're supposed to be down on the bottom. Let's see, how do I do this? I think I do solo or something. All right, hold on a second. All right, Phil, you can stay. Okay, so we're going to go now into Leviticus. Let me open it up. Bible Hub. So we're supposed to start in Leviticus 6, but I think I'm not going to do that. I think what I'm going to do is, so we finished last time. Let me just share the screen. Let me see if by some miracle the Starlink is back working, and if it is, I'll switch over to Starlink. If not, then we'll have to stay on this crappy network. Nope, not working. I'll try. Let's see here. Nope. Okay. So, all right, let me share the screen. Share screen. Window. Torah. Okay, so that should be that. And let's try this again. What did I just do? No, that's not what I meant to do. Okay. 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 All right, good enough. That. I don't know what the heck I'm doing here anymore. All right, we'll leave it like that. Okay, so we are now going to, okay, so we're supposed to start in Leviticus chapter 6. second here. Paul, can you mute yourself, please? Yes, we're starting in Leviticus chapter 6, basically 6, 7, and 8. But I'm going to do it a little bit differently. So we spoke about the burnt offering, and then we spoke about the grain offerings. Okay. So chapter 3 goes on to the what they call the fellowship offering. In Hebrew, it's the shlemim, sometimes translated as the peace offering. And then chapter 4, just get an overview here. Chapter 4 is the sin offering, the asham. And then chapter 5 continues the sin offering. Then we get to the guilt offering. Okay. And then that's it. Then we have other regulations for the offerings we've already spoke about. That's 6. Then we get to 8. And that's the ordination of the sons of Aaron. Okay, so basically we don't really have any narrative, right? There's no narrative. The next time we're going to get to narrative is in chapter, is it 9 or is it 10? It's 10, where we have Nadav and Avihu, right? So what I think I'd like to do, since basically it's all what we call technical stuff, and since what I'm really trying to do and show is that this technical stuff is actually fascinating. It's not Torah flyover country, as I like to call it. It's not boring stuff. It creates a system that really makes sense when you think about it. So I think what I'd like to do, since we got to chapter 2, we spoke about the burnt offering, or as we called it, the fully burnt, or the everything goes up in flames offering, or the Holocaust offering. That's where the more common use of the word Holocaust comes from. It actually comes from a translation of this offering. Holocaust, we said holo meaning whole or everything. Cost means fire, means everything goes up in fire. Everything, with the exception of the skin and the blood of the animal, or in the case of the bird, it's we said the crop and the feathers is thrown onto the altar. And so actually, no, there were 1 or 2 other parts, right? It was the leg, the feet also. I can't remember now. But at any rate, right, that was the fully burnt offering, or the holy burnt offering. Then we spoke about the grain offering. So I think what I'd like to do, when we got to the end of chapter 2, I think what I'd like to do is continue in chapter 3 with the next type of offering. So at least what we could do is we can get an idea of the different types of offerings and see how they all fit together as a system. Okay. We haven't seen yet really the use for these offerings, but we've seen the differences, or we've seen the rules for bringing each of these types of offerings. Okay, so that way, because throughout the book of Leviticus, and actually throughout the entire Tanakh, we see examples of or commandments, or examples of people bringing a certain type of offering. So I think it would be useful to know what these different types of offerings are, and at least to get a feel for what the rules regarding those offerings are. Okay. Now, of course, it's very technical, and so to aid that, let me go grab it for a second. We made a spreadsheet. Let me grab the spreadsheet. Just give me a second, please. Here we got the spreadsheet. So spreadsheet has a lot of stuff in it, but the one we were using and once again, I mentioned if anyone would like access to the spreadsheet, I mean viewing access, then please let me know and I'll be happy to send you the link. So we are in, where was it? Only laws, 1 second. Each other tabernacle materials, translation, animal terms, sacrificial laws. Sacrificial laws. Okay. And we've been cataloging. Well, we didn't get through all of 2, and I'm not going to go back and do it now. I'll have to do it another time. But we've been trying to catalog these laws to try to get an example of the overall system. Okay. So let's do that. Let's try to go through chapters 3 and maybe 4, and who knows if we're lucky, maybe 5. But I don't think we're going to get that far. So let's, rather than going to 6, which is just going to be technical stuff, and it's going to be skipping ahead in some of the later technical stuff, let's go back to chapter 3 and continue where we left off. Okay, so we remember we did the holy burnt offering, the Holocaust offering, and we did the grain offering, the rules of the grain offering. So now let's start talking about the peace offering. They call it here the fellowship offering. The shlemim, usually translated as the peace offering, and let's look at some of the rules and maybe even compare it to the rules of this is an animal offering. The second chapter 2, the grain offering was not an animal offering, right? So this is again an animal offering, and maybe we can compare it to chapter 1, which is the fully burnt offering, and see some of the differences. And it would be great, obviously, in whatever time we have left, 2 hours or so, we're not going to be able to, totally pick apart and catalog and internalize the entire system of the entire sacrificial system. But if we can get a taste as to what the different types of offerings are, then it will help us. It will make more sense when we see it in other places throughout the Tanakh, right? So if Solomon brings peace offerings, what they're calling here fellowship offerings, then we could be like, yes, I remember. I learned about the fellowship offering. This is what it means. It means not the whole animal goes on the altar, unlike the fully burnt offering, unlike what they often translate as a burnt offering. Right? This is a little bit different. Okay, yeah, that now that makes a little bit more sense. Okay, what it's used for a little bit. Well, here they don't really speak about what it's used for, but what it is. Okay, so I think that would be the wise way to go about this here. We'll go to Leviticus 3. We cover the first 2 types of offerings, which are the burnt offering and the grain offering. And now let's dig into the third type of offering that's mentioned in the book of Leviticus, which is the peace or the fellowship offering. And let's go through the rules regarding it. Let's specifically with an eye towards seeing what the differences are between the rules for the fellowship offering, the peace offering, and the fully burnt / Holocaust offering of chapter 1. Okay, and I really encourage people to if you have time on your own, homework assignment. If you have time on your own, look at the different offerings, what they are, what they're used for, what the rules regarding them are, and if you don't have time to actually go through the chapters themselves, which can be very technical and very detailed, at least do a Wikipedia article, right? Grab a Wikipedia article on the peace offering, or the grain offering, or the guilt offering, and get an idea of what they are and what they're used for. Okay, and that way, when these types of offerings, which are mentioned throughout the Tanakh, are mentioned or referenced, then you'll have an idea. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I know, I know what that is. That's the peace offering. Okay, and it will make more sense rather than just David brought slaughtered whatever 10 bulls and as burnt offerings, and I don't know what the numbers are, 15 bulls as peace offerings, and 15 rams as peace offerings. Like, okay, that's nice. It doesn't make sense. But when you get an idea of what the different types of offerings are, what the rules are regarding them, and also a bit of when they're used, then it's going to really make the other parts of the Tanakh kind of come alive, because the different offerings do have their specific uses, they have their specific meanings, and they have their specific rules around. Okay, so that all being said, let's dig in with Leviticus chapter 3. and we'll bring up the Hebrew. I'll also bring up a couple of areas we generally use. So let's bring up our Robert Alter. He's our go-to, and I always say, people think, oh, I'm a Robert Alter fanboy. I just like worship at his feet, and everything he says is, is the word of God. That's absolutely not true. I just find his commentary to be very accessible, usually accurate, well explained. His translations, the words that he uses to translate into English, are very well thought out, to try as best as you can to express the essence of the Hebrew. But I don't agree with everything that he says. I agree a lot with a lot of what he says, but I certainly don't agree with everything that he says. And also, he's really coming from a somewhat secular point of view. He's a professor out in, I can't remember, somewhere in California, UC, not Berkeley, UC San Francisco, maybe. I can't remember what it was. But he's a Jewish, but secular, or at least semi-secular. Maybe he's traditional. He's he's basically a secular Bible scholar. But his commentary is very accessible and accurate, and explains a lot of good things. So I like to use him as an initial go-to. Okay. Then if we just want translation, then we can go for Everett Fox. So there's no commentary, at least not here. He did write some commentaries, but there's no commentary here. And let me just bring it up. And he also is very careful. He chooses his English words very carefully to try to express the essence of the Hebrew. So that's another go-to, but it's not a commentary, it's just a translation. And then in this case, although we probably honestly won't reference it because it's so detailed, and actually I don't even have it up here, is the Anchor Bible with Milgram. So Milgram is maybe one of the leading experts on the book of Leviticus, on the entire, cultic, which means, again, the standardized or the systematized worship of Yahweh, systemized service to Yahweh. Was one of the leading experts on this, and he wrote a huge book about it in incredible detail. I think the book is like 1,200 pages long. So I won't even bring it up. Maybe later we'll reference him. I'll bring it up. Hold on a second. If I can find it. But it's just so detailed that we probably won't reference it. But I'll just bring it up since we are in the book of Leviticus. Let's see here. Oh, just give me a second here. Milgram, Anchor Bible. It's just Leviticus 1 through 16. And I think it's like 1,000 pages. Just Leviticus 1 through 16. Hello. You can do it. What happened? Oh, I see what happened. It opened up an Acrobat reader. Of course, quit Acrobat. Absolutely horrible program. And let's do it this way. I think drag and drop. And boom, there we go. So there's our Milgram. So this is his commentary on Leviticus 1 through 16. It's not even all of Leviticus, and it's 1,200, almost 1,200 pages. Okay, that's Milgram, and maybe, oh, I forgot, for that we don't have the rest of it. We only have, okay, that'll be enough. That'll keep us busy for sure. And then we have some other commentaries that we sometimes refer to, the Hertz. It doesn't matter. We have some other commentaries we can refer to if we want to. So that being said, let's dig in. Starting in Leviticus 3, with an eye towards filling in our spreadsheet. Okay, we'll give it a different color. So this was green. I didn't log all of chapter 2. So let's make this one, oh, I don't know, how about that nice little color there. Okay, so this will be chapter 3. Oops, get back here. Get back here. There we go. Give it a nice background. There's our color. Yeah, that's ugly. Let's choose the nice one. There we go. Okay, so this is going to be Leviticus chapter 3, and we'll try to log. I don't know what number this is, so I'll start logging it at number 100. And let's dig in. Here we go. Leviticus chapter 3, and we're talking about the peace offerings. So like I said, my goal is really to get people not to think of these parts of the Torah as Torah flyover country. Okay, these are fascinating, amazing things when you see how the whole system fits together, and then if you see how relevant it is when you're reading other parts of the Tanakh, then one will have a much more of an appreciation for what could otherwise just be perceived as like just boring technical, endless chapters of boring technical stuff. Where literally, if you go to a synagogue, you'll see half the people. Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you'll see people falling asleep during these chapters because there's no action, right? There's no war, there's no death, nothing's going on. There's no golden calves, there's no Moses on the mountain. It's just technical stuff, and it can easily be perceived that way unless you try to see it as a brilliant whole system that all fits together. Okay. And like I said, I've seen people fall asleep during these chapters. I've seen rabbis fall asleep during these chapters because it's not always the rabbi who reads from the Torah in a rabbinical synagogue. Sometimes the rabbi takes a break at that point, and then you have the Baal Koreh, you have the Torah reader come up and do it. And I've seen the rabbi doze off, especially during these chapters. Okay. All right. So here we go. So, and let me just go back for a second to chapter 1. So with the burnt offering, the fully burnt offering, okay, we'll start here. It said, if someone wishes to present an offering to Yahweh, okay, so this is the introductory. I want to go back to these two sentences because these are the two introductory sentences for all the different types of sacrifices. And again, the ones we've covered so far, the fully burnt offerings and the grain offerings, but this is the introduction to all of them. This is Leviticus chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. Okay, and it says, Vayikra el Moshe, and Moshe called, Vayikra el Moshe, and Yahweh, he called out to Moses, meaning Yahweh called out to Moses. V'yidaber Yahweh, and Yahweh spoke Elau to him, Me'ohel Moed lemor, from the tent of meeting. And remember now, at the end of Exodus, God has moved into his house. He's moved into the tent of meeting. So now he's speaking to Moses from the tent of meeting. We spoke about this last week. And by the way, Vayikra, this is the Hebrew name for the book of Leviticus, Vayikra. And the Hebrew names for the 5 books of Moses are based on usually the first significant word of that book. So here, the first significant word, meaning not a word like it or who or he or she, right? The first significant word is the first word of the book, and that's Vayikra. He called, okay, to Moses, and that's the name of the book in Hebrew, Vayikra. Okay. Verse 2. Daber el bnei Israel, speak to the children of Israel, Mata alehem, and say to them, Adam ki yakriv mikem. One second. Daber el bnei Israel, Mata alehem, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban Yahweh. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, any person, any human being that wishes to offer. I'm sorry, one second. Ki yakriv mikem korban Yahweh, that wishes among you to offer an offering or to present an offering to Yahweh, mina behema, from among the mammals, umina tzon takrivu et korbanchem. You can bring it from among the herd animals, basically meaning bulls and cows, or among the flock animals, basically meaning sheep and goats. You can bring your offering. Okay, so this applies to all the different types of offerings. If you're going to bring a mammal offering, then it either has to be from the herd animals or it has to be from the flock animals. Okay, and then it goes on in verse 3. Im olah korbano, if his offering is an olah, and olah is the Hebrew word for the fully burnt offering, the Holocaust offering. Okay, and then it goes on to give a whole bunch of rules regarding specifically the fully burnt offering. Excuse me for 1 second. I just got a quick message that I have to respond to. Just give me 1 second. 1 second, please. One second. One second. All right. So that's it. Then it goes into the laws for the fully burnt offering. Okay. And then in chapter 2, v'nefesh ki takriv korban mincha, and if a person wishes to present a grain offering to Yahweh, and then it goes on to give all the laws of the grain offering. Okay. So that's the way it generally works. If a person wishes to bring such and such a type of offering, then these are the laws. And that's why we have here in verse 3, I'm sorry, in chapter 3, verse 1, Wa'im zevach shlamim korbano, im hu, and then it goes on to give the law. So let's just start with this. Wa'im zevach shlamim korbano, and if a peace offering, a peace slaughter offering is his or if a peace sacrifice is his offering, then we go on to all of the laws for the peace offering. Okay, let's just get a Robert Alter translation. See how he translates it. What he is calling this zevach shlamim. It's usually translated as the peace offering. But okay, so this is Leviticus 3:1. Second here. It's bigger. Oops, back here. Oops, get back here again. So he calls it a communion sacrifice, which is interesting. And I'm sure he'll explain why he's calling it a communion sacrifice. So let's take a look and see what he has to say. It's page 884. Okay. So why is he calling it a communion sacrifice? Well, he's a little footnote here. So check out what he has to say. Communion sacrifice. So he says there's some uncertainty as to precisely what category of sacrifice this is, especially since the second term of the Hebrew designation, zevach shlamim, could be related to whole, shalem repay, shalem well-being, greeting, or peace, all meanings of shalom. Jacob Milgram, that's the guy we mentioned, who is, was one of the major leading experts on the book of Leviticus, understands this as a well-being sacrifice, but Baruch Levine argues plausibly, using Ugaritic parallels, that it means a sacred gift of greeting. The translation used here, communion sacrifice, conveys that sense compactly and follows the rendering of the term in 1 Samuel by Kyle McCarter Jr., whoever that is. So he's calling it a communion offering. But see, he mentions the different things that can be translated as, okay? A repayment offering, a well-being offering, a greeting offering, or a peace offering. So that's usually what it's translated as, is a peace offering, okay? We saw here that the NIV in the English translated it as a fellowship offering. Robert Alter is translating it as a communion offering. And let's take a look very briefly at Everett Fox and see what he translates it as. Oops. Let's go back a little bit more. So he doesn't translate it at all. Okay. He calls it a slaughter offering, the zevach of shalom. So he cops out in a certain sense. He says, this is too difficult for me. I'm not even gonna try to translate into English. And he calls it a shalom offering. Okay, good enough. So we get the idea. I usually will go with Robert Alter's translations. But I think I like actually a greeting offering. I think that maybe doesn't express it. Communion. Because communion, all right, we can go with communion offering, peace offering. I don't know. It's a tough one to translate. I'll just say peace offering because that's what it's usually translated as. Maybe sometimes I'll say communion offering, okay? But it's it's basically like to say hi to God. It's kind of a positive offering. There's some offerings which are, you could say, negative offerings, and there are some offerings which you could say positive offerings. So these usually happen on happy occasions when someone wants to say, "Hey Yahweh, just checking in, saying hi. I'm really happy about the life you've given me, or something that's happened." That's a little bit different, but just checking in and saying hi. Okay, some good things are happening, and I just want to sacrifice to you. Okay. All right. So that being said, we'll either call it a peace offering or a communion offering, following Robert Alter. And I've got to plug in my battery in 1 second. Okay. So we saw in chapter 1 that for all of the meat offerings, if it's a mammal, then it has to be from either the bakar, the herd, or the flock. So we're now getting the law. If it's from the herd, so mina bakar hu makriv. So if he offers it, if he presents it and it's from among the herd, meaning it's bull or cow, im zachar, im nekevat, tamim yakrivenu lifnei Yahweh. Okay, so let's add that to our list. So that's our first law. So it means whether it's a male or a female, tamim, it has to be unblemished. Tamim means pure, unblemished, perfect. Here they translate it without blemish. Okay, Robert Alter translates it as unblemished. Okay, meaning you cannot sacrifice a crap animal to Yahweh. Okay, let's say your animal is missing an ear, or it's blind. Okay, or it's lame, it can't walk well, or it's been castrated. Okay, these are considered unacceptable offerings to Yahweh. You cannot take anything but the best, the most perfect, and bring it as an offering to Yahweh. And Yahweh gets really mad when you do, because it's an insult to him, right? And the example is, let's say you have a king, right? Let's say there's an earthly king, and each year everyone from his kingdom comes and presents him a gift. And you say, and someone comes and presents him, I don't know, presents him, he makes gold rings, and he presents him his best gold rings. Thank you, king, for protecting us. And you're a great king, and here's 5 gold rings, 5 golden rings. And then someone else comes along and says, you know what, I have 5 gold rings also, but I'm going to save those for myself. I'm going to bring these, these crappy silver rings, which, I tried to make, but they didn't come out too well. Okay, I'll bring that to the king. I don't want to give him the best, right? That's an insult. If the king finds out, you may be beheaded or thrown in the dungeon with if the king's really in a mean mood, he may stick you in a dungeon with Kamala Harris, right? That could really that's a fate almost worse than death. So you're always bringing the best. You're always bringing the top, the cream of the crop to Yahweh. You're not giving him anything that is damaged. You're not giving him damaged goods. You're not giving him second best. He's the king. He gets the best. And if you don't bring him the best, and there are many examples we see in the Tanakh where they're not bringing him the best, then that's considered an insult. That's considered extremely disrespectful and extremely ungrateful. It's showing a lack of appreciation for all that Yahweh does for us as our Father and our King. Okay. So he only gets the tamim. He only gets the unblemished. Okay, so let's add that to our spreadsheet. And we could probably pick similar law from up here. Let me see. Okay. So let me just grab this and repurpose it. I'll change it a little bit. Did that work? Yes, it did. So we're calling this 100. This is Leviticus 3:1. Get back here. Leviticus 3:1. Offering type, I'm just going to call it peace offering. Peace. Okay. Maybe for the first time I'll write communion. Right? So communion means like coming together, right? I gotta do this 1 second. I'm just gonna say peace. Now, format, wrapping. Okay, that's wrappy. Okay, category. What are we putting in category? Mammals. So we're talking about, hello. Okay, so the overarching category spreadsheets has gone completely crazy. It's gone crazy. Okay, I have to plug in a second. Oh, at 5%. I have to plug in right now. Guys, hold on a second. I'm not going to disconnect. Let me plug in. Or else we're going to be completely, the computer's going to shut off. One second. Oh, shoot. One, two. One second. Got two of our three cats behind me here on the couch. They're learning a little Torah. Right, Shoham? You a cat Torah scholar? Suf? No, you're sleeping. Torah scholar today. Okay. All right. Okay. That's that. 1 second here, guys. Show. Move. What are you doing? Come here, Shosho. John. 1 second. Shosho, come here, sir. Stop wandering around. I want you to make pee-pee. Stay. Okay. Good luck telling a cat to stay. It doesn't work. Might work for a dog. I'll let him outside. Go, Shosho. All right. So, all right, we're plugged in. We should be good to go. Okay, so back to our spreadsheet here. Quick sound check. You guys can all hear me okay? Yes? Okay, cool. Okay, so so we said, okay, so for let's change this piece. Communion offering. So we said if it is from the herd, okay, from the herd, bull or cow, the animal must be an unblemished male, okay, and that's it. Okay, so that's the law we learned right now in Leviticus 1:3 for a peace or communion offering. If it's of the mammals, if it's herd, meaning again a bull or cow, then for a peace offering from the herd, the animal must be an unblemished male. But now here it's not an unblemished male. Here can be a male or a female. Okay, so let's change that. The animal, whether can be, or let's say whether male or female, must be unblemished. Okay, so already we see a difference between a peace offering and a fully burnt offering. So for a fully burnt offering, it must be a male. Okay, for a peace offering, it could be either a male or a female. Okay, that's Leviticus 3:1. Let's go on to Leviticus 3:2. וסמך ידו על ראש קורבנו, ושחטו פתח אוהל מועד. That's semicolon. This little symbol here called an etnach. Sometimes heard it called an etnach. This means this is like a semicolon. Okay, so stop right there. So the person bringing it rests his hands on the head. Rosh Korbano, he rests his hands on the head of his offering, of the animal. Ushachato, and he slaughters it. At the entrance to the tent of meeting. And we saw, what does that mean? That means basically at the altar of sacrifice. Let's bring up again map of the tabernacle. Map of tabernacle. Oops. Not a map of tabernacle, New Jersey. Who cares about tabernacle, New Jersey? And oh, I think I have it. No, I don't have it. Let's do it again now. So let me bring this up a little bit differently. Stop. Open. Desktop. Oh, there we go. Okay, so that's the map of the tabernacle. Just make sure you guys can see that. That's a map of the tabernacle, and it says at the opening of the tent of meeting. Here's the tent of meeting, this area here. This is the opening. This is the entrance to the tent of meeting. But we saw last week that when it says the opening to the entrance to the tent of meeting, it really means out here in the courtyard. It really means at the brazen altar, the altar of sacrifice. Okay. So the person lays his hand on the animal's head and slaughters it at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Let's see if we can grab that here. So it's basically the same thing. We can grab this here. It's brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting. So we'll say also, let me just see one thing here. Okay. Let's do it this way. It is brought to the tent of meeting where the person bringing it lays his hands on its head and then slaughters it. Okay. Okay, so that kind of sums it up. Okay, so that's Leviticus 3:1. That's the laws we get there. Actually, that's not even all of it. And now the Kohanim, the priests, the sons of Aaron. This points out that the priests are the sons of Aaron, right? The male descendants of Aaron are the priests of Israel. Zarku et hadam ala mizbeach saviv. So they spill or they throw the blood around the altar. Okay, I'm sure we can find a similar thing in chapter 1. So let's grab that. Let's see, did this way. The person bringing the offering must butcher the animal itself and then give it to the Kohen. The Kohen takes the blood of the slaughtered animal and pours it all around the altar of sacrifice. So this is Leviticus 3:1. Let's copy that over here. Okay. So this is 101. This is Leviticus 3:1. You don't have to repeat this column. That's what we're doing. Let's say peace. Oh, get back here. Peace. Mammals. Repeat that. Type herd, we know. Okay, so the Kohen takes the blood of a slaughtered animal and pours it all around the altar of sacrifice. That's verse 2. So I'm sorry, this is Leviticus 3. Okay, so this is 3:1. Samachat Yadon. Okay, so I messed up. 1 second. Okay, so it's unblemished. So this goes into verse 2. Okay, this is verse 2. So let's do it this way. 1 second. Skip a line. One row above. This goes there. Okay, it is brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting, where the person bringing it lays his hand on his head and then slaughters it. So this is Leviticus 3:2. Leviticus 3:2. Peace offering. I really don't need to repeat it. It's clear. Okay. Calling this 101. Calling this 102. Sorry for the delay here. We'll get the swing of it. Okay, and then in Leviticus 3:2, the Kohen takes the blood of the slaughtered animal and pours it all around the altar of sacrifice. That's 3:2. Okay, now we're up to verse 3:3. Leviticus chapter 3, verse 3. Let me just make sure I did that correct. 2, the Kohen takes the blood of the slaughtered animal, pours it all around the altar of sacrifice. And okay, perfect. Okay, now up to verse 3. Vikriv mizevach hashlamim ishet liyahweh et achelev hamichaseh et hakerev wa et kol achelev asher al hakerev. Okay, so now we're going to get a list of these fats. Okay. So the idea is that no matter what, and this is very interesting. Okay, the idea is that no matter what the type of sacrifice, the fat, these specific fats, sometimes called the forbidden fats, in Hebrew it's the chelev. These forbidden fats are always thrown on the altar as part of the sacrifice to God. The fats are what God likes. You could think of it as like someone who's at a barbecue, and everyone has their, and some people just love certain parts of the barbecue, right? So I don't know. I guess when I was growing up, I've been a vegetarian for many years, but when I was growing up, I used to love lamb chops, and my favorite part of the lamb chop was sucking the marrow out of the bone of the lamb chop. Okay. Well, God's favorite part, the part that is always given to Him, okay, that He loves, is what's called the chelav, the forbidden fats. Okay, and they're called forbidden fats. Why are they called forbidden fats? They're called forbidden fats because they're forbidden for us to eat ever. These fats are always given they're always the altar, and if they can't be thrown on the altar as a sacrifice to Yahweh, we can't eat them. And this is, by the way, a distinction between what the Rabbinites believe and what the Karaites generally believe. And this has to do with shawarma, or if you live in the United States, gyro. But we're not going to get into it right now. Actually, I don't know if they do gyro. If you've ever had shawarma, it's very relevant to shawarma. We won't talk about it right now. Okay? Has anyone ever tried to rebuild the tabernacle? Desiree asks. There is as I pointed out a number of times, there is a mock-up of the tabernacle, a life-size mock-up of the tabernacle in Timna Park, which is about a half an hour, 45 minutes north of Eilat. So if you're ever in Israel and you go to Eilat, forget about Eilat. It's beautiful. Check out the snorkeling, but don't sit in the hotels wasting your time, or do they have casinos there? I can't remember. Whatever they have there, don't waste your time. Take a day trip, grab the kids, grab the grandkids, grab whatever, the dogs, the cats, go up 45 minutes up to Timna Park and spend a couple of hours at the replica, the life-size replica of the tabernacle. It is really, really worth it. Okay. If a picture is worth 1,000 words and a video is worth 1,000,000 words, then a life-size replica with knowledgeable guides is worth 10 million words. Okay. Okay. So what do we have here in verse 3? So this is very important because if you notice, when we're speaking of the fully burnt offering, the Holocaust offering, there is no such commandment to take these fats and throw them on the altar. Why is there no such commandment? Because the burnt offering, what's usually translated as the burnt offering, the fully burnt offering, the Holocaust offering, everything except for some of the entrails and a couple of waste products, everything is thrown on the altar. So there's no reason to say that the fats have to be thrown on the altar because the whole animal is essentially thrown on the altar. Well, now we get to the second type of meat sacrifice, chapter 2, grain sacrifices. Now we get to the second type of meat sacrifice, which is the peace communion sacrifice. and we find out that the fats have to be thrown on the altar. And this is going to be important because this is in this type of sacrifice, some of the animal is not thrown on the altar. It's given to the Kohanim as their salary, as their gift, their present. Okay, so let's log this. So it's a fire offering. So far, all three of the types of offering we've encountered are fire offerings. Okay, fire offerings mean offerings that are thrown on the altar. And even the grain offering, if you remember, was called a fire offering. Okay, let's find that for 1 second. Why would the grain offering be called a fire offering? Because the grain, these different types of grain offerings that are mentioned are thrown on the fire. Okay, so here, Ishe Yahweh, this is speaking about the grain offering, and this says Kodesh Kedoshim, it's holy of holies among the fire offerings to Yahweh. So even if you're bringing grain offerings or these type of grain offerings that are mentioned in chapter 2, and remember there are a number of different types, then they're thrown on the pieces of them, parts of them are thrown onto the altar. So it's called a fire offering. This is opposed to other types of grain offerings, such as the Omer offering. You guys have all heard of the Omer offering, probably, especially as Karaites. It's very relevant to the Aviv, right? The Omer offering traditionally doesn't say it explicitly in Torah, it may hint at it, but the Omer offering is brought during the 7 days of Passover, and it is not a fire offering. It's not an offering that's thrown on the altar. It's a wave offering. It's an Omer Tnufa. You take the sheaves of barley and you either lift them up and down or you wave them back and forth. There's different, there's different opinions as to what actually is done, but it's not a fire offering. But so far, these three types of offerings we've discussed: the Holocaust or fully burnt offering, the different types of grain offerings, and now the peace or communion offerings. They're all fire offerings. At least part of the offering is thrown onto the fire. It's thrown onto the sacrificial pyre on the altar of sacrifice. Okay, so, and maybe we should even point out, now we'll just leave it. And now we have these different types of, now we're going to get a list of different types of fats that are thrown onto the altar. Okay? So the fat that covers the entrails. Okay? Sometimes I'll translate that as stomach. In fact, let's see how Robert Alter translates that. It's Leviticus 3:3. Fat covering the innards. Okay? So the fat that covers the innards, asher v'kol ha'chelev asher al ha'kerev, and all of the fat that is surrounding or above that fat. Let's see again how Robert Alter deals with that one. Fire over the fat. Second, the fat covering the innards and all the fat that is on the innards. Okay. So that is thrown on the altar. So let's log that. Okay. So this is Leviticus 3:3. Grab this and copy it. We're calling this 103. I don't know why I'm numbering them, but whatever. Okay, we've got Leviticus 3:3. It's a peace offering. It's of the mammals of the herd. And now we have, oops. Oh God, sometimes this thing is hard to use. You know what? Let me make this a little bit bigger. One second. I'm going to make this bigger. Just click out of here. There we go. Okay, good. That makes it easy to work with. So now we have here, so and I'll put in parentheses the forbidden. And why is it called forbidden fat? It's called forbidden fat because we human beings are never, ever, ever allowed to eat these fats. These are always God's gift. They also could be compared in a certain sense to the blood. We are never, ever allowed to eat the blood of animals. And by the way, does that include, well, that's another story, but does that include mammals? Does that include birds? Does that include fish? It seems that it would include mammals and birds. And the reason we know that, or the reason we can perhaps surmise that is because the fish are never, it's never spoken about the blood of fish. Okay, let me make it smaller. Actually, it's a little bit easier. So we have blood that's thrown, because the blood is basically thrown at the altar, and we only have mammal and bird sacrifices, and the blood of those animals are thrown at the altar. Okay, we learned about the burnt offerings in Leviticus chapter 1 last week. Okay, so the forbidden fats. So the forbidden fat covering, as Robert Alter do it. As Robert Alter say it, covering the innards and all the fat on the innards. I'll just copy paste. So the forbidden fat covering the innards and all the fat that's on the innards. So what happens with that? So these are brought as a fire offering. Okay, these are brought as a fire offering to Yahweh. Okay, so I'll just say are thrown on the fire. Okay, cool. That's Leviticus 3:3. Now we go on to Leviticus 3:4. And now we're going to get more types of fat. את שתי כליות, ואת החלב, כל החלב אשר על הקרב, את שתי כליות, ואת החלב אשר עליהם, אשר על הכיסלים, ואת היותרת על הכבד, על הכליות יסירנו. Okay? So these are talking about different types of fats. Okay, so let's grab that. I'll just grab from our altar to make it quick. And the two kidneys and the fat that is on them, which is on the sinews and on the lobe of the liver, together with the kidneys, he shall remove it. Okay. That here. So again, this is not word for word. This is also the kidneys, and the fat on them. And the lobe on the liver. Okay, shall be removed, are removed. That's what this verse says. The fat on them and the lobe on the livers. שתי כליות ואת החלב אשר עליהם אשר על הכיסלים ואת היותרת על הכבד על הכליות יסירנו. Just make sure I got all of that. So 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them, which is on the sinews, and the lobe on the liver, together with the kidneys, he shall remove. Okay, fine. So that's a different types of, these are more things that he's going to remove from the animal. Okay. And verse 5. ויתירו אותו בני אהרון המזבחה, a second please. על העולה אשר על העצים, אשר על האש אישר ריח ניחוח ליהוה. Okay, so basically I'll just translate word for word. ויתירו אותו בני אהרון, so he's going to cause it to go up in smoke. The children of Aaron are going to cause it to go up in smoke. And whenever it says the children of Aaron, that just means one of the Kohanim. It doesn't mean necessarily the chief Kohen. It means, or the chief priest, the high priest. It means one of the priests that's ministering in the temple. Okay, so he's gonna make it go up in smoke on the altar of sacrifice. Or sometimes Everett Fox translates that as on the slaughter spot or on the slaughter place. Ala ola, on top of the burnt sacrifice or along with the burnt sacrifice. Asher ala etzim, which is on top of the wood. Asher ala esh, which is on top of the fire, as a isher, a fire offering, reach nichoach Yahweh, as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. And this is the key here: sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. Right? This is what Yahweh. This is the part of the animal. If you invite Yahweh to your barbecue, this is the part of the animal he likes. Okay, just like Aunt Edna loves the chicken tuchus, the chicken butt, and crazy Uncle Mordechai loves the I don't know, loves the cartilage of the of the lamb chop, right? So Yahweh, this is what he loves. He loves these parts of the animal. These are his. And you better not, if you invite him to the barbecue, and the only place you're allowed to have any of these barbecues is at his house, right? He's always throwing a barbecue, basically, right? He's throwing pretty much an ongoing barbecue. So you go to his house and you're participating in this barbecue, which is out in his backyard. Okay, he's inside the house, inside the tent. The barbecue's going on in the backyard, and this is the part of the animal that he likes. You're in his house, and on top of it, he's God. So you better save him these parts. Okay? And why? And what does it say? It's a reach nichoach. Nichoach Yahweh. It's a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. This is what he likes to smell. And when he smells his favorite part of the animal, then he's going to be nice to you. He's going to really say, wow, these people are being, they're saving me my favorite part of the animal, right? Maybe the same way that Isaac loved Esau, because he would bring him prey, or he would bring him that which he hunted out in the field, right? Lahavdil, this is a bit different here, because God is not making the same mistake that Isaac made. But nonetheless, this is the part of the animal that when Yahweh smells it, he says, wow, these people really love me. They've saved for me my favorite part of the animal, the best part of the animal, part of the animal that I really love. And you know what? They're showing me how much they love me. So I'm going to do all kinds of nice things. I'm going to forgive them for their sins. I'm going to forget. I'm going to, close my eyes and forget all the bad things they do. I'm going to do good for these people. They're showing me, they're bringing me to my barbecue, which I'm throwing in my backyard, my favorite part of the animal. Okay, and that's the idea here of the reach nichoach. The reach nichoach is we shall see is really linked to the idea of ratzon, that Yahweh. It's tough to translate into English, but it's often translated as how do they usually translate it again? As desirable, or as I can't remember the exact translation, but the idea is that it's considered yiratzeh. It is beloved, or it is wanted, or is appreciated by Yahweh. Okay, these favorite parts of the animals, these fats, these forbidden fats, and the only reason they're called forbidden is we never eat them. We always give it to him because it's his favorite part of the animal. These parts of the animal, these fats that he loves so much, when he smells them, then he kind of they're appreciated by him, and then he says, wow, these people really care about me. They're saving me the favorite part of the animal, and I'm going to do good things for them. Okay, that's basically the idea. Okay, all right, so let's go on. So what didn't we log here? Okay, so Aaron and his sons, so the Kohanim, basically they throw it on the altar. Okay, so let's add that. So this was Leviticus 3:4. Let's add that. So this is 104. This is Leviticus 3:4. Boom, that's that. Okay, and now we're logging 3:5. Okay, so these parts of the animal are brought up in smoke. What's the expression I'm looking for? Or we'll say are thrown or placed, thrown on the altar on top. Oh, we'll just say to go up in smoke as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. Spell his name right. Give respect to the king. Okay, these parts of the animal are thrown on the altar to go up in smoke as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. Okay, so that's chapter 3, verse 5. Did I forget anything? I should add the priests, let's make it this, the priests, or let's say sons, let's say the priest throws these parts of the animal onto the altar to go up and smoke as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. Okay, I think that pretty much sums up Leviticus 3:5. Change this to 5. 4. 5. Okay. Are you guys enjoying this? I really hope you're enjoying it, because again, you know, one of my goals here is to make these supposedly boring parts of the Torah to show that they're not boring at all. They're really kind of interesting, and we're going to see differences between the different types of sacrifices. We've already seen one difference. The difference between the peace offering and between the burnt offering, the fully burnt offering, is that here only these forbidden fats, I won't say only, but in the meantime, these forbidden fats are thrown onto the fire. And we learned a lot by understanding that these parts are basically God's, we could say, favorite food. Okay. All right. Let's move on. And now we have here a peh. Peh is a parsha petucha. It's basically the Torah's way of saying this is the end of a chapter. Okay, so this is actually a Torah, a Masoretic chapter ending. From here to here is a chapter. So now we go into a new chapter. Okay. And now this new chapter, now we're going to speak about, so we spoke about the herd animals, we spoke about the bulls and the cows. Now we're going to speak about the flock animals, which means, well, we'll see what it means in a second. So the im means on korbanot, the zevach shlamim le Yahweh. Let's stop here. There's our semicolon. That's the etnaf, that little wishbone symbol below Yahweh. Okay. So if it's now, we're not talking about the herd animals, we're talking about the flock animals. So let's update here. Let's grab our word flock. Flock. Get the flock over here. Okay. Boom. There we go. This is Leviticus 10. This is 106. Just extend this like this, right? No, that didn't work. Yeah, just do it with my hand. Leviticus 3:6. Okay, so now we're talking about the flock animals. Flock basically means sheep and goats. Okay. So im minatzon korbano lezevach shlamim nazachar u'nekeva tamim yakrivenu. So it's the same thing. It could be a male or female, and it has to be unblemished. Once again, peace offering. Okay, and maybe what we should do. Let's see. Burnt offering image. We have a good image of a burnt offering. All right, forget it. I was going to maybe get pictures of a burnt offering versus a peace offering, but well, we'll do it by words. Okay. So remember, with a burnt offering, it was only a male. With a peace offering, whether it's for the herd or for the flock, we've seen now it could be a male or a female. Why? Because a peace offering is in a sense, it's like a less serious offering. I mean, this is my own interpretation. Right? Let me point that out. Right? A peace offering, I won't say it's a less serious offering. It's a more like free will, or it's like it's for more happy occasions. It's not so solemn as a burnt offering. Okay, a burnt offering is more, it's your basic type of offering, and I won't say basic, it's your most it's almost all of the other offerings will include, or often the other offerings, if other offerings are brought, they'll also be a burnt offering. It's kind of like your most fundamental type of offering, and it's a bit more, it has a sense, again, this is my own interpretation, the burnt offering, the fully burnt offering, the Holocaust offering, has a sense of being a bit more formal, a bit more solemn than the peace offering. The peace offering is kind of like good things happen and we sacrifice a bunch of peace offerings to Yahweh. So it could be a male or female, but the burnt offering, which is the most fundamental, in my opinion, or in my sense of it, a bit more of a solemn offering, that can only be a male. Okay, But here we have again, so with the flocks, it could be a male or female, so we could basically just copy that. So we can copy this basically word for word here, except we change it for, so from the flock. Okay. The animal, whether male or female, I spelled whether wrong. Change that. And bring this up here, change that as well, whether. Okay. It must be unblemished. Once again, unblemished means nothing's wrong with it. It's not missing an eye. Okay, it's not lame. It doesn't have some kind of horrible skin disease. It's not castrated. Okay, you're only bringing perfect animals to sacrifice to Yahweh. If you don't, then it's a huge insult. Yes, we'll get to that, Desiree. Parts of the peace offering are eaten by the Kohanim. We'll get to that in a second. Okay. In a little while. Okay, so that's verse 6. Verse 7. Im kesef hu makriv et kormano ikriv oto lifnei Yahweh. So now we're talking about a kesef. What is a kesef? Now we have to go to another one of our Torah sheets, our animal terms. Volki, pay attention. We're talking now about kesef. Not keves, but there's another word, kesev. Okay, so you might want to look that up. Okay. So animal terms, let's look up our animal terms here. So here's keves, which is a lamb, but we also have kesev, like in Leviticus 22:27. So that's a baby lamb. It could be a male or female. It's young, right? It's a baby. And it's specifically of a sheep. It's not a sheep or a goat. It's a sheep. So it's basically a baby sheep, which is a male or female. That makes sense because we know that the peace offering, the communion offering, can be either male or female. Let me read what I wrote here. I don't even remember what I wrote, but I wrote something. Exactly the same meaning as keves. And according to the BDB, is a transposition of the word keves. And according to Ibn Ezra, kesev, and therefore keves, mean an adult sheep. Okay, I don't know why. At any rate, we have it listed here as a young sheep, basically a lamb, a male or female baby lamb. Okay. Let's go back to our sacrificial laws. Okay. Okay, so if it's a lamb, then this is really 7 and 8. If it's a lamb, then verse 8 tells us, ושמח את ידו על ראש קורבנו ושחט אותו לפני אוהל מועד וזרקו בני אהרון את דמו על המזבח סביב. So again, it's the same thing like the bull/cow, that the person bringing it rests his hand on the head of the sacrifice, of the offering, and then he kills it himself in front of the tent of meeting, which again means out in the courtyard by the altar of sacrifice. And then the sons of Aaron, basically the priests, they take its blood. They spill its blood all around the altar. Okay, so again, we can kind of copy and paste. I spelled entrance wrong. I spelled a bunch of things wrong. So, right. So here, this is really 3 and 4 together. So we could grab these two. It's basically a repetition, right? So this is this. So this is 107. Why the heck I'm numbering these, but whatever. This is 108. And maybe we can mark this as being a chapter ending. I'll put a line here. Right? You can kind of mark that as we said, it's a chapter ending, a Masoretic chapter ending. So now we go into the flocks. So it is brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting. The Kohen takes the blood of the slaughter animal, blah, blah, blah. We just read that. Okay. So that is, where is it? Korbanon im kesef yukriv korban yukriv oto lifnei Yahweh. Samach et yedo al rosh korbanon v'shachat oto lifnei Olam So that's Leviticus 3:8. That's Leviticus 3:8. Leviticus 3:8. Copy, paste, Leviticus 3:8. Okay, cool. We're getting there. Verse 9. Vikriv. Mizevach hashlamim ishel Yahweh. Okay, so now we're talking about, so now just like when we were talking about the bulls and the cows, the next thing we did, we got after we were told that the Kohen takes the blood and pours it around the altar, then we have the forbidden fats that are listed. Now we're talking about sheep, and we're going to have different types of forbidden fats that are listed. So let's talk about that. This is verse 9. Vikriv mizevach hashlamim ishe leyahweh helbo aliyah tmima omat he. Sorry, it's not showing up correctly. He atse yasirenu wa'et hacherev hamichase et kerev wa'et hacherev asher al hakerev. So we have different types of fats here slightly, okay? And then it goes on to verse 10, so we'll do 9 and 10 together for now. Actually, 9, 10, and 11 are kind of almost repetitions of what we had with the bulls. So let me read through, and then we'll talk about them. Verse 10, wa'et shtei haklayot wa'et helev asher alehem asher al kisalim wa'et hayoteret al kaved al haklayot yisirena. Verse 11, wa'iktiru wa'hiktiro hakohen hamizbeha lehem ishe le Yahweh. Okay, so verse 9 says, "Uikriv mizevach hashlamim ishel Yahweh." So from this peace slaughtering, okay, he's going to offer as a fire offering to Yahweh, and then we have the different types of the forbidden fruit, not forbidden fruit, the forbidden fats. So we have chalbo aliyah. Okay, chalbo aliyah means it's usually translated as the fat, the tail fat. Okay, or the sheep. It's the tail fat of the sheep. Okay, so I'm not a butcher, and actually I'm basically a vegetarian. So I don't know very much about, the different parts of the animals that a butcher might know. But if you look at a picture of a sheep, and anyone who raises sheep, and I have a feeling there might even be some in this audience, right? The sheep tail. Okay, not exactly the most flattering pictures, but you guys get the idea. All right, so here's a sheep from looking at it from where the sun don't shine, and that's the tail of the sheep, right? And you can see that basically it kind of hangs there, which means it's I guess it doesn't necessarily hundreds imply, but what's going on there is that there's a lot of fat. I don't even know if there's a bone there. I don't know. Ask a butcher, okay? But it's basically basically a lot of fat in that tail. Maybe the whole tail is just fat. I don't remember. Okay, covered by basically this fat, the fat that's in the tail of the sheep. Okay, this is the chalev aliyah. This is the fat of the tail. Let's see how they translate it here. Of the fatty tail. Let's see how Robert Alter deals with that one. Fire okay, so he shall bring forward from the communion sacrifice a fire offering to the Lord. It's fat opposite the backbone. That's how he translates it. We look at the Hebrew again. Okay, got it. So basically it's the fat tail, okay? With the tail fat. And this is again the fat that covers the innards, and all of the fat that is around the innards. So it's the same thing as we saw with the cows, with the one addition. So I'll grab it here. Okay. So the forbidden fat covering, or the forbidden fat. What did I do here? Try that again. So this is the forbidden fat. So we add one thing here of the tail, covering the innards and all the fat. Get rid of it, and the fat on the innards. The tail, covering the innards, and on the innards are thrown on the fire. Actually, it doesn't say are thrown on the fire there, are removed. So I'll just add are removed here. Okay, and let's make it, instead of passive, let's make it active. Okay, so we'll say the priest removes the forbidden fat of the tail, the fat covering the innards, and the fat on the innards. Okay, boom, perfect. Here we have up above, forbidden fat covering the innards. Okay, cool. So that's Leviticus 3:9. And this is 109. So this is specifically what has to do with shawarma. So if you are a Karaite and you go to Israel, and I guess anywhere else, you should not eat shawarma. Okay, why should you not eat shawarma? Because the way that shawarma is made, so traditionally, shawarma was made out of sheep meat, out of lamb meat. Okay, that's why shawarma is related to the Greek gyro, or gyro, or gyros, or however you really are supposed to pronounce it. Okay, and traditionally that's made out of lamb meat. But if you go to Israel and I guess other places around the world, and you order a shawarma, which is extremely popular, okay, and shawarma again is kind of like a gyro, it's not made out of lamb meat. Why is it not made out of lamb meat? Because lamb meat is expensive, right? And then you're not going to be able to get your 12 shekel shawarma. So they cheap out. They give you cheap meat. It's usually turkey meat, and they take the turkey meat, but in order to give it the taste of lamb meat, they will take the tail of a sheep, and they'll place it on top of the spit, right? The shawarma, it's like a gyro. It turns around. It's a spit. It turns around and around. Okay. They'll take the tail of a sheep and they'll place it on top of the spit, and so the heat causes the fat to melt out of the that sheep tail and then drip down onto the turkey meat. So I guess if you're really stupid, then you think you're eating lamb meat, and if you're a little bit smarter, then you know that it's turkey meat, but at least it has kind of somewhat the flavor of lamb. So it's closer to traditional shawarma, because once again, traditional shawarma is made out of lamb. Okay, so that for us Karaites, that's a big no-no, and that's why if you're ever in Israel, or I guess anywhere in the world, you should never ever eat a shawarma, or you can ask if this is what they do, because the fat that fat drips out of the tail of the sheep is, according to right here, to Leviticus chapter 3, verse 9, this is one of the forbidden fats. This is one of the fats that gets thrown, that it only can be eaten by Yahweh. We're never to eat it. It's only food for Yahweh, and if it cannot be given to Yahweh as a sacrifice, then it's discarded. Okay? The rabbis, and I'll talk about the rabbis in a second. Okay? So to make a long story short, right? We can't eat shawarma because this forbidden fat is dripped onto the turkey meat. Okay, so never get a shawarma in Israel or anywhere else unless you ask first. And I think 99% of the time, this is what they do. I think they do this. They do this around the world. Okay, so then why is shawarma sold in Israel? Isn't it unkosher? You can walk into a falafel or a shawarma shop in Israel, and it's going to have a kosher certificate. It's going to say it's perfectly kosher. In fact, it might even be glatt kosher, the strictest ultra-Orthodox form of kosher. Why? The reason is because the rabbis interpret forbidden fats differently. The rabbis say that if it's not an animal that's being sacrificed, then you can eat the forbidden fats from that animal. That the restriction on eating the forbidden fats only applies to animals which are sacrificed. So if it's an animal that's brought to the Kohanim, that's brought to the priests, and is offered as a sacrifice, then that animal's fats, forbidden fats, cannot be eaten by human beings. But if it's an animal that you raise out in your sheep pen and wherever, then the rule of forbidden fats does not apply. And that's one of the, I guess, somewhat better known differences between the way the Rabbinites usually interpret these verses and the Karaites, and the way the Karaites do. Karaites believe that forbidden fats are forbidden fats. They're only meant to be food for Yahweh, whereas the Rabbinites believe that the forbidden fats only apply to animals that are sacrificed. And if it's an animal that's not brought as a sacrifice, just a regular animal that you kill and eat, then you can eat any part of the animal, including the fats. They're not forbidden. Okay, so all food is kosher in all of Israel? No, I wouldn't say that. But I would say that most of it is. The large majority of food is going to be kosher. Even those, it really depends where, right? So of the more religious cities like Jerusalem, a large majority of the restaurants are going to have kosher certificates. They're going to be certified by a rabbi or by a rabbinical authority. If you go to a less religious city like Tel Aviv, then the percentage is going to be less. But the fact of the matter is, you're going to be very hard pressed to find a restaurant in Israel that doesn't have kosher food. Even if it doesn't have a kosher certificate, most people in Israel are pretty traditional, and they're not going to do things like mix milk and meat or put pork or seafood in the food. So I generally, even if a restaurant doesn't have a kosher certificate, as long as I know what's on the menu and I know they don't have shrimp or lobster or pig or something like that, I don't care if they're mixing milk or meat, that's rabbinical, then I'll generally eat there. In general, food is kosher in Israel, but sure, you should always check it out. There are some, I mean, in Israel, you have a trend, like the most anti-religious, the most left-wing, they will do it, as they say in Israel, dafka. They'll specifically want to eat shrimp and pork and lobster and all this kind of stuff. So yes, you will find unkosher food in Israel, but that's going to be the exception rather than the rule. Okay. Okay. Bottom line is, I don't know. I'm really not into the politics with that, Paul. I don't know if they're still trying to do that. Hey, the bottom line is, don't eat shawarma, okay? Because you're going to be eating this khalbo ha aliyah. You're going to be eating the fat of the sheep tail. Okay. Okay. So ikriv mizevach hashlamim misham. Okay, we did this. We did verse 9. Let's go into verse 10. We're almost done. I wouldn't say, but we're getting close to being done with Leviticus 3. And if we only do Leviticus 3, but we do it thoroughly, I'll be happy. Okay, but we'll probably also do at least 4. Probably stop in about half an hour to an hour. But we'll do at least, for sure, we're going to get done with 3, and that's really good, because I really want to go through each of these types of sacrifices. Even if we don't go through all of them, I'd rather go through a couple of them thoroughly to give you guys all a taste of the rules associated with a certain type of sacrifice, some of the differences between the different types of sacrifice, rather than just rushing through. Right? If we read this a million miles an hour, I mean, it would be a complete snoozer. It would be meaningless, right? It's like when you read the census of the tribes, and it just says, the tribe of Reuven was counted and his numbers are blah blah blah, on and on and on, right? It's a big snoozer unless you do something with it, right? So we'd rather go slow, see all the laws for certain type of sacrifice, and this actually serves as a template for realizing the differences between the different types of sacrifices. Okay, all right. So let's move on. We are in verse 10, and we get more forbidden fats. I did that right. I did log 9. Let me just make sure. Yes, the fat on the end. Perfect. Verse 10. وאת שתי הכליות, ואת החלב אשר עליהם, אשר על הכסלים, ואת היותרת על הכבד, על הכליות יסירנו. So now we're going to get a repetition of, where is it? This. Okay. The kidneys and the fat on them. שתי כליות, ואת החלב אשר עליהם. Yeah, it's exactly the same. על הכבד. It's probably word for word, I would imagine. So let's see. Let me just read it for 1 second. So that was Leviticus 3:4. So Leviticus 3:4, when we were speaking about the bulls, I'll read it in Hebrew. ואת שתי הכליות, ואת החלב, אשר עליהם אשר על הכסלים, ואת היותרת על הכבד, על הכליות יסירנו. And here we have in verse 10 exactly the same thing, word for word. שתי כליות, ואת החלב, checking, אשר עליהם, ואת הכסלים, yep, את היותרת על הכבד, boom. It's exactly the same thing, word for word, so we can just copy off of that. Copying is allowed here. And that's Leviticus 3:10. So the English translation or the English summary of it is also the kidneys, the fat on them, the lobe on the liver removed. Okay. I'll fix that up in a second. This is number 110, whatever that means. So let's repair this because something doesn't make sense here. So we have, so the two kidneys, let me just fix this up also. Okay, also the two kidneys and the fat on them. We were just omitting that, fat on them. And okay. What is this, kidneys? Oh, I see. There's a second line in there that I didn't see. Okay, cool, fixed. This goes back here. Okay, cool, we're good. So that's Leviticus 3:10. Okay, 3:11. V'tiru hakohen hamizbech halechem ishet liyahweh. So he will make it go up and smoke. The Kohen, the priest, will make it go up and smoke on the altar as food, a food by fire to Yahweh. So this is a little bit interesting. So here we had that it's going to go up and smoke, ala ish, okay, ultimately on the fire, as a fire offering, a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. So the bull peace offering was called a sweet smelling scent to offer to Yahweh, sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. This one is called a food by fire, or maybe a burnt, no, a food that is, see how we can translate this. Okay, a food as a fire offering to Yahweh. So this, the difference is, to make a long story short, is the bull is called a reach nichoch, a sweet smelling scent, and the sheep is not called a sweet smelling scent, it's called food. So we're going to take this. Lechem literally means bread. By extension, since bread is the basis of all food, was considered in ancient times and still to this day to a certain degree is, right? You start your meal generally with bread. So it's the same thing here. So I can copy this. Seems 3:5. Let me just see one thing here. Okay. On the altar to go and smoke as food. Just change it as food to Yahweh. Okay. 111. Oh, I'm going to do it this way. Hold on a second. 1 second. Let's do it this way. Well, 111. And this is Leviticus 3:11. Okay, so with the bull, with the herd animals, it was called a sweet smelling scent, and here it's just called food. It's not called explicitly a sweet smelling scent. So let's see if Robert Alter has something to say about that one. And this is Leviticus 3:10. Excuse me. Hey, get back here. Nope, he has nothing to say about it. Oh, he does. It's not 3:10, it's 3:11. So let's see what Robert Alter has to say about that. Fire offering bread. The Hebrew lechem, which has the primary meaning of bread, is often a sinik doche. I'll explain what a sinik doche is in a minute, but it basically means the basis of an extended meeting. It's like the base for an extended meeting. Sinik doche for food. Let's get a formal definition for this word. Sinik doche. So figure of speech, in which a part is made to represent the whole or vice versa, as in England lost by 6 wickets, meaning the English cricket team. Okay, so a part represents a whole or a whole represents a part. If you say, I don't know, it doesn't make sense. The classic example is Washington spoke to Moscow yesterday. Okay, well, Washington didn't speak to Moscow. Joe Biden, who, if he had a brain, would his brain would be in Washington, spoke to Vladimir Putin, who definitely has a brain, and in Moscow, right? It doesn't mean that the city of Washington literally spoke to the city of Moscow. So when we say Washington spoke to Moscow, we have a larger part representing a smaller part. The whole is representing a part, and also the part can represent the whole. And that's what Robert Alter is saying here for the word bread. So it says in the Hebrew, as we logged here in our sheet, right? I put it down as food, but the word really is bread. So it really literally says it's a bread fire offering, or it's bread as a fire offering to Yahweh. But it doesn't mean bread. Bread represents, again, it's the sinik doche. It's a part that really represents the whole. The part is bread. The whole is food in general. Okay, so bread is being represented to use food because bread is the essence of any meal. Okay, so going on with what Robert Alter has to say, as here, where the sacrifice is meat, not cereal. The pagan Near East, sacrifice was generally thought of as food provided by man for the gods. Boy, a lot to say about that. It's not clear whether the religious elite of monotheistic Israel preserved this belief. And by the way, you can see here that Robert Alter is coming from a secular point of view, because he says the religious elite of monotheistic Israel. That's a statement, or that's a phrase, that's a phrasing that just shows he's kind of a secular academic. The idiom could be no more than a linguistic fossil, though one may suspect some persistence of the idea in popular imagination. Okay, so he doesn't relate to the fact that this is called a bread. This is called bread, and the other one is called a sweet-smelling scent. Let's see if he says something about sweet-smelling scent. No, he doesn't, actually. Okay. No, he doesn't. But he does raise this issue of, is this really considered food for Yahweh? Okay. And the answer is no, but it represents food to Yahweh, because Yahweh lives, as we've said many times. So at the end of Exodus, Yahweh moves into his house. This is Yahweh's house. In fact, he lives right there, okay, in Jerusalem. If you live in Jerusalem and the temple is built, he is literally your neighbor. But he doesn't exist. He doesn't have a physical form, right? This is the difference between Israelite religion, between Torah and basically just about every other religion, maybe with the exception of Islam. Okay, so, and that's why, despite all of the problems we have with the Muslims, that's why at the end of the day, I do have respect for Islam, much more than I do for Christianity. And if we think the Muslims gave the Jews trouble, the Christians gave the Jews just as much trouble, if not more, than the Muslims throughout the ages. Okay, so at any rate, the point being that Yahweh does not exist. He doesn't live here. He doesn't have a physical form that lives here. We speak about, and we've spoken about many times, the kavod Yahweh, the glory of Yahweh, is what exists there, is what dwells there. What does that mean? It is not something that has a physical form. It's very hard to put in words, if I even really knew what it was. But for the best of my kind of understanding, or the best of my intuition, it basically means kind of like his spiritual essence And remember, the spirit has no it's not spirit is out of time, it's out of space, it has no physical form, it doesn't have weight, it's not made of atoms, right? It's not of this world, but yet let's put it this way, we are in a body, okay? We have a mind, we have a mouth, we have eyes, we all also have a soul, and the soul, even though we know that our soul is not a physical entity, it's not part of space and time, we can't find the soul in our body. We know that somehow our body in this physical world is, it's the soul, the spiritual energy of our soul is emanating out of our body, right, into the world. It's the same thing. That's like our glory. That's the glory of Melech ben Yaakov, or the glory of Suriel, or the glory of Desiree is emanating from us out into the physical world where we all interact with each other. That's maybe the best analogy I can give for what it means to say that Yahweh lives between the cherubim on the ark cover of the Ark of the in the Holy of Holies, which is inside the tent of meeting, which is inside the court of which is inside the surrounding court of the tabernacle, which is ultimately was placed in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount, right? So it's so God's spiritual, I hate to use the word soul, I won't use the word soul, his spiritual essence emanates on this earth from that place, and that's called the glory, the kavod Yahweh. And we saw that word many times. We saw that it was up on the mountain when Moses went up to the mountain, to Mount Sinai. We saw that ultimately at the end of the book of Exodus, it rested. It came to move. It moved into its I won't say permanent house because the house moves around, but it moved into its tent between the at the end of the book of Exodus. And we mentioned that also in the book of Ezekiel. I can't remember which chapter. I think it's chapter 11. I'll say different chapters, but somewhere in the book of Ezekiel, that when Yahweh gets really pissed off at the people of Israel, his glory departs. We see Ezekiel describing his vision of how the glory of Yahweh departs the temple and basically goes away. Okay, so right. So how do we get on saying this? I don't remember. How do we get onto that topic? One second here. I don't remember, to be honest. Okay, whatever. That's the idea. Okay, I'm sure if it comes to me, then I'll backtrack. So okay, so like so we're talking about that's the food. Oh, right. So yes, so we're saying that what does it mean when we're bringing these forbidden fats, we're throwing them on the altar as food for God? Is he really eating? Is it really his food? No, it's not really his food. It's all symbolic. Okay, we're kind of symbolically feeding this neighbor that we have that lives on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which is the glory, which is kavod Yahweh. Does the glory of Yahweh actually eat the? Of course not. We see it's thrown on the altar, it goes up into smoke, and it makes a sweet smelling scent, or it's food for Yahweh. It's not meant to be taken literally, right? We don't see some God coming down and eating it or something like that. It's basically our symbolic way of saying that we're bringing something special to Yahweh. We as human beings who are physical beings and who do eat and drink and sleep and smell and hear and all of this kind of stuff, then we actually do eat. So this is kind of symbolically giving Yahweh the food that he loves as a way of us saying that we appreciate, that we love him and appreciate all that he has done and is doing for us. Okay. All right. So let's go on. Oh, are we stuck? Oh, shoot. Here we go. Okay, I think we got stuck. I may have to restart the computer. Let me give it a second. If it clears itself, then we're good. If not, then I'll have to restart the computer. Are you clear? No, still doing its nonsense. I think from previous experience, I think you guys can hear me. I'm going to restart the computer. I'll be back in about 5 minutes. So just, keep yourselves busy. Chat among yourselves, as they say. Okay, be right back. Okay, I think and hope I am back. Can you guys hear me? Can we do a sound check? Hello? Cool. All right, so we know by now this happens once per study. For some reason, Chrome decides to freeze up and I have to restart the computer. Okay, so we're back. Let's finish off Leviticus chapter 3. Let me share the screen. Just give me a second here. Okay. Okay, so right. So we're up to verse 12. And Im is Korbano Ikrivo Lifnei Yahweh. So now we do the goats. So let's do a little goat thingy going on here. So this is the flock. Oh, this is supposed to be mammals, herd. Okay, let's do it this way. Second. So this is flock. Sheep. Flock. Let's do it this way. Sheep. And this is now going to be flock goats. All right, we're going to get basically a repetition. So now we're up to the goats. Okay, so we were talking about the flock animals. So we know, actually, this is incorrect. So this is just flock. This is for sheep and goats. One second. Seven. Seven is where it starts. 1 second here. Oh, so I didn't put seven. Seven. Okay, so 7 just points out that's the sheep. So from here we could do flock. So I'm just going to put sheep. And now this is going to be the goats. Okay? So we already know that it could be a male or a female. So here it doesn't repeat it. So when we were introduced here, so this is the flocks. So for the flocks, and the flocks include, so when we say that the herd animals, that basically include bulls and cows. When we say the flock animals, that basically includes sheep and goats. And we saw that if it was a flock animal, meaning a sheep or goat, then it could be a male or a female, and it must be unblemished. Then in verse 7, we started with the sheep. So this deals with the sheep from here to here. And now we're still in the flocks, but now we're dealing with the goats. Okay? So if it's a goat, what happens? It's basically going to be more or less a repetition. Okay, so verse 13. ושמח את ידו על ראשו ושחט אותו לפני אוהל מועד וזרקו בני אהרון את דמו על המזבח סביב. That's, I think, word for word exactly the same verse as, where was it? right here as verse 8. It's exactly, it is exactly the same word for word. So we can copy 8 down to here. The only difference is, okay, so there's my silly numbering system, which I don't know why I put. Let me get rid of this numbering system. I don't need this numbering system, do I? No, I don't need this. Law number. Oh, I see. I was numbering the laws. I don't like that idea. That's kind of iffy. Some laws. I don't know. I'm going to scratch this entire column. This is silly. Okay. So this is 3:13, Leviticus 3:13. And now we're talking about the goats. And it's exactly the same thing. It's brought to the tent of meeting. It's exactly the same as 3:8, word for word. Verse 14. יקריב ממנו קורבנו אישה ליהוה את החלב המכסה את הקרב ואת החלב אשר על הקרב, את שתי כליות ואת החלב אשר עליהם אשר על הכסלים ואת היותרת על הכבד על הכליות יסירנו. So it's exactly the same as the bulls, the herd animals, and it's exactly the same as the sheep minus the fat tail. So we saw that looking at that beautiful picture of the sheep again, right? This one. So we spoke about the, come back up. We spoke about the sheep tail, but with a goat, there's no such thing, right? It doesn't have, there, it's a little stubby tail, right? It's not like a big fat filled tail like we have on the sheep. And the same with a cow. It's a little stubby tail, okay? Is it? I don't know. No, it's a long thing, isn't it? No, that's a horse. Hold on a second. See, this is why I should have grown up in Texas, for God's sakes. Okay, so it's a long thin tail, but it doesn't have the fat like the sheep does. Okay, so therefore we have exactly the same word for word as the forbidden fats of the bulls, of the herd animals. One second here. See, I should add to that. That's 13. 1 second here. See, I forgot one thing. Slaughters it. And then the priest spills the blood around the altar or at the base. סמך את ידו עליו שחט אותו לפני אהרון מועד, קחו בני אהרון את דמו על המזבח סביב. The priest spills the blood around the altar. Okay, so that's really the whole thing. And then I should copy this back up to 8. It says also, I didn't mention the part about spilling the blood, which should be mentioned. That's very important because the blood is the essence of the animal, right? I should also spell tent correctly, not the tent of the meeting, the tent of meeting. So let's try that again. I should spell bringing correctly. That would be nice. Why am I not getting spell checking on this thing? But whatever. Okay. Then the priest spills the blood around the altar. Okay, so that's 13. So it's basically the same thing. And then we have the forbidden fat parts. And I could really just do this. 1 second. can consolidate these two because it's really the same. Get rid of this. Okay. And then we have these two verses are now repeated. This is from the herd. So remember, the only difference between the forbidden fats of the herd animals and the forbidden fats of the sheep was that we had the inclusion of the fat tail with the sheep. Well, when we get back to the goats, as we saw from that beautiful picture of the goat's butt, that the goats don't have these big long fat tails, and so therefore it's the same rules as the sheep's, as the herd animals, as the bulls and yikes, that's not what I meant to do. Let's try that again. This is basically a repetition of Leviticus 3 and 4. I'm sorry, Leviticus chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. And this is 14 and 15. It's, I think, again, word for word. You could even yep, it's word for word, basically. Okay, almost. So this is going to be now 14 and 15. So we can just change that. That's 15, and those are our forbidden fat verses. So we see a pattern, right? We see a pattern. Okay, it's the same thing again and again and again. So for the herd animals, okay, we're told at the beginning it could be male and female. Then we're told it's brought to the tent of meeting. Person lays his hands on its head and then slaughters it. Then the priest takes the blood, spills it around the altar. Then we have the forbidden fats listed that are thrown on the altar. And then we have that these parts of the animal are thrown onto the altar as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh or as bread to Yahweh. Then we have basically the same thing for the flock. Okay, we're told it's got to be a male, it could be male or female, must be unblemished. We have the sheep, okay, brought to the tent. Person lays his hands on it. It's brought to the tent of meeting, meaning by the altar. Person lays his hands on it. The person who brings it then slaughters it. Then the priest takes over, takes the blood that's collected. The priest collects the blood and then spills it around the altar. And then the priest, I have to consolidate here again. Also, this goes bye-bye. Okay, so the priest takes it and spills the blood around the altar. And then the forbidden fat is listed, the particular forbidden fats. In this case, with the sheep, this also includes the fat tail, okay? And then the rest of the same forbidden fats that we have for the bull and we have for the goats. And then the priest throws these parts of the animal onto the altar and it goes up as smoke, in smoke as, in this case, food to Yahweh. And we're going to have exactly the same thing with the goats. We could pretty much almost copy and paste it, but we won't, okay? So this is the same as the goats. This is 14 and 15. And then we have 16. Okay, so the Kohen now throws it on the altar to make it go up in smoke as a bread by fire or by fire offering as a sweet smelling scent. As sweet smelling scent, all of the forbidden fats or all of the fats that go to Yahweh. Okay, see how Robert Alter deals with that one because the language is a little bit awkward in the Hebrew. So let me see how he deals with that. 1 second. Leviticus 3. So he says, and the priest shall turn them to smoke on the altar, fire offering bread for the Lord, as a fragrant odor, all the fat to the Lord. And he does not have a comment on that one. Okay. So that might just be a summary sentence for all of the fats that are thrown. I have a feeling, let me just read it back again in the Hebrew, just to parse it my own. Yeah, I'd say that up to here, so up to here, it's called a food. It's the same thing. It's called a food to Yahweh by fire. Okay, and then I think starting here, this is really a summary of all of the fats that I've thrown on the fire. All of the fats that go to Yahweh are a sweet smelling scent. And then verse 17, then we have a summary sentence for the entire chapter, for all of chapter 3, for all of the peace or what do we call it again? The communion offerings, okay? Which is and we'll talk about that separately, okay? And this will get back to our shawarma issue. So, all right, so let's do it this way. So we're going to copy this one. Here. And this is Leviticus 3:16. Oops. Second. Okay, that's Leviticus 3:16. And I think at this point we have, I'm going to call this a summary, starting here. So Leviticus 3:16. No, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it this way. So we can get our color. Well, it doesn't matter. I'll just color it in afterwards. So Leviticus 3:16. We have also that this is a sweet smelling scent. All of the fats are sweet are a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. Okay. All of the forbidden fats are a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. All right. Color that in. And then verse 3, and then chapter 3, verse 17, the last verse of chapter 17. Okay, so then we have Chukat Olam L'Dorotechem B'Kol Moshvatechem. This is an eternal statute throughout all of your generations, throughout all of your habitations. Kol chelev v'kol dam lo tochelu. You should not eat any forbidden fats, even though it says fats. The implication here, the context here is forbidden fats, and you should not eat any blood. Okay, and this is, let's first log it, and then we'll talk a little bit about it, and then I think we're going to end. I don't think we're going to go on to chapter 4, because I think it's just going to be too technical at this point. So let's just summarize here. This is Leviticus 3:17. It is an eternal statute for all your generations. And I don't want to say word for word. All your, say, statute throughout all, now, for all your generations, and throughout all your habitations. That you should not eat, the blood and forbidden fats. Okay, so this is super important. And why is it super important? So this is our summary sentence, okay? And let me translate word for word, and then let's talk about why it's so important. So Chukat Olam, an eternal statute, L'dorotechem, throughout all of your generations, or for all of your generations, b'chol moshvatechem, throughout all of your habitations. And whenever you see this phrase, this usually means no matter where you are in time and in space, whatever generation is and wherever you're living. You could be, living in 300 BCE in Rome. You could be living in 1100 CE in Toledo, Spain. You could be living in 2024 in Los Angeles, God forbid, not lo aleinu, and that no matter where you are, no matter what generation you're in, that you are not allowed to eat the blood of the animal, and you're not allowed to eat the forbidden fats of the animal. Okay, so that's what this is saying. And this is, again, this points to the difference between the Rabbinites and the Karaites. So this phrase basically, so why do the Karaites then believe you're not allowed to have shawarma? Okay, why is shawarma forbidden? And why do the rabbis not forbid shawarma? Because once again, the rabbis say that the forbidden fats, that the prohibition of eating the forbidden fats, the fats that have been mentioned throughout Leviticus 3, only apply to animals that are brought as sacrifices. Well, this verse doesn't seem to jive with that. Why? It says throughout all of your generations and in all your habitations. Okay, this implies that no matter where you are. Okay, now in ancient times it could imply just within the general land of Israel. Yeah, you could potentially bring that as a sacrifice, but this phrase is used also, for instance, with the Shabbat. Wherever you are, throughout all of your generations and all of your habitations, you should not do milacha on the Shabbat. Okay, so whenever this phrase is used, and this is a specific phrase which isn't used too often, this seems to imply that wherever you are in time and in space, wherever an Israelite is in the world, and no matter what time it is, what year it is, that you're not allowed to eat these forbidden fats. Okay, this implies. So why would the Torah tell us this? Because obviously, if you're eating an animal, let's say you're living in Los Angeles again, God forbid, if you're living in Los Angeles, why would the Torah wouldn't need to tell us that you can that the forbidden fats of such an animal should not be eaten, because there's no chance of bringing such an animal as a sacrifice, right? It's too far away from Jerusalem. We can only bring sacrifices on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. So the Torah wouldn't need to tell us this. The Torah would basically say you're allowed to, or according to the rabbinites, the Torah would tell us you're allowed to eat the forbidden fats or the fats of an animal that's far away in Los Angeles, because you're not bringing that as a sacrifice. Okay, there's no way you could bring the sacrifice. You're too far away from Jerusalem. And according to the rabbis, if you're not bringing the animal of sacrifice, you can eat all of the fats. There's no such thing as forbidden fats for such an animal. But this verse seems to imply that no matter where you are, that there is such a thing as forbidden fats, just like the blood. Okay, if the rabbis were to be consistent, then they would also say, well, you can, if you're in Los Angeles and you're not bringing the animals to sacrifice, you can also eat the blood. Because it speaks about not eating, no matter what generation you're in, and no matter where your habitation is, where you happen to be living in the world, that you're not allowed to eat the blood and you're not allowed to eat the forbidden fats. And the rabbi said, well, the forbidden fats only apply to an animal that you would bring as a sacrifice. Well, if it's in the same verse and it's the same phrases being used, no matter which generation you're in and where you happen to be living, don't eat the blood, then this would also imply that only the blood of sacrifices should not be eaten. And if it's just a regular animal, you can eat the blood. But we know from many other places, including the so-called Noahide laws. Actually, the rabbis don't interpret that law that way, but we know from the laws that Noah is given that no one is allowed to eat the blood of the animal. The blood is not to be eaten; it's to be spilled on the ground. Okay, so since that applies to all animals, then the chelev would also seem in this verse to apply to all animals, no matter where they are, no matter whether they're being brought as a sacrifice or not being brought as a sacrifice, no matter whether you're taking your sheep up to Jerusalem to slaughter it and offer it on the altar, or whether you're in Los Angeles and you have a sheep pen, or you go to the butcher shop and you buy some sheep parts and they have the fats on it. Okay, either way, those fats, no matter where you are and no matter what generation you're in, should not be. It's according to this verse, it seems pretty clear that those fats should not be eaten. If those fats are the only thing that are allowed to happen to them, is they're to be put on the altar. And if they're not to be put on the altar, then you're not to eat them. You discard them. Okay, because that's God's food. That is the food that's set aside for God. That is the sweet smelling scent of the food of the fire offering to God, and no one is allowed to eat it except God, except Yahweh. And therefore, this is why
this goes back to the shawarma issue. This is why we're not allowed to eat shawarma, because even though the sheep tail that's put on top of the shawarma in Israel and I'm assuming elsewhere, I'm sure elsewhere, okay, even though that sheep tail is not from the sheep from a sheep that was meant to be brought as a sacrifice, this verse tells us that no matter where you are in the world, no matter what time it is, okay, it doesn't implying that it doesn't have to be an animal brought as a sacrifice. Any animal, the forbidden fruit, the forbidden food, forbidden fats, including in the case of the sheep, the tail from the fat, the fat from the tail of the sheep is not allowed to be eaten. If it's a sacrifice, it's thrown on the altar. If it's not a sacrifice, you're not allowed to eat it. You discard it. Okay, and that's why we're not allowed to eat shawarma, or that's why Karaites believe that we're not allowed to eat shawarma that have the fat of the sheep tail dripping onto the turkey meat, which is what shawarma is in Israel. Okay, hope that makes sense. That sums everything up. That is Leviticus chapter 3, and that is a taste of these different types of offerings. So to summarize, once again, we've come across three main categories of offerings. We've come across what is usually translated as the burnt offering, but we translated it as the holy burnt or the Holocaust offering, where the entire animal, except for some of the undesirable parts, such as the skin and the innards, they are thrown. The entire animal is thrown on the altar. Okay. Then we have the grain offerings. These are fire offerings as well. Whether you're baking unleavened cakes, and remember, all of the grain offerings have to be unleavened. We had a question last week. Well, it says that, for instance, in the case of in Leviticus chapter 27, verse 17, I believe it was, in the case of the, oh, what happened here? Oh, I don't know why that went off. Okay, let's try this again. I see what happened. I wasn't on the headphones. No biggie. Get on the headphones.
So in Leviticus chapter 23, I think it was verse 17, when it speaks about bringing chametz, when it speaks about bringing leavened bread as an offering for Shavuot, for the festival of weeks, for the holiday of Shavuot, remember, that's not a fire offering, that's a wave offering, okay? It says there you shall wave it before Yahweh, okay? Or the priest shall wave it before Yahweh. So that's a wave offering. But if it's a fire offering made out of grain, then it can only be unleavened bread, and parts of it are thrown on the altar, no matter what different types it is. We had a couple of different types, whether you bake it in the oven, whether you fry it on top of a griddle, whether you fry it in a deeper frying pan, and there were a couple of other types as well. Okay, so that was the grain offering, and now we went on to the peace or the communion offering, which is different from the fire offering in a number of ways. First of all, it could be a male or a female, whereas the burnt offering or the Holocaust or the fully burnt offering must be only a male. In this case, the forbidden fats are thrown onto the altar, and the rest of the animal is not thrown onto the altar. Okay. In the case of the fire offering, the entire animal is thrown. I'm sorry, not the fire offering. In the case of the Holocaust offering, the fully burnt offering, the entire animal is thrown onto the altar. Okay. So we have differences between these different types of offerings. So we've covered three types. In Leviticus chapter 1, we covered the burnt offering, or as we're calling it, the fully burnt, or the Holocaust, or the everything goes up in flames offering. Leviticus 2, we have the grain fire offerings, the grain offerings, which are brought in various forms, and a certain piece of them, or a certain portion of them, is taken and thrown on the altar. That's a grain fire offering. And then in chapter 3, we have the peace or the communion offerings, where only the forbidden fats are thrown onto the altar and the rest is not. Okay, so that gives us a taste. That gives a taste into these different types of sacrifices. And when they're mentioned, and they're mentioned many, many, many times throughout the Tanakh, when they're mentioned, we should have a better idea of what's being spoken about. If we see that a burnt offering, that an olah is offered by a certain figure in the Tanakh, or later on when we have more laws for these different types of offerings, that should mean a certain thing to us. When we see it's a mincha, it's a grain offering, that should mean a certain thing to us. When we see that it's shlamim, that it's a peace / communion offering, then that should mean a certain thing to us. And we didn't get to the other types of offerings. Maybe we will next week, I'm not sure yet, but we have a sin offering. Okay. And that's called the chatat. Let me find the word here. So that's usually translated as sin offering. That's a poor translation. I think Robert Alter translates it based on Milgram as a purification from sin offering or a purification offering, but it's generally the standard term is sin offering. Then in 5, we have a guilt offering that's called an asham. Okay, ashamo means his guilt offering. Then in chapter 6, and that's it. And then we have more rules about each of the different types of offerings, and specifically here, if we were to read here in chapter 6, let's just read it very quickly with a quick translation. Yahweh el Moshe lemor. So Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Tzav et Aaron ve et banav, command Aaron and his sons, lemor zot Torah olah. These are the instructions regarding the Holocaust offering, the fully burnt offering. Hi haolah al mukta al mizbeach kol halayla ad haboker. So it's to burn on the altar kol halayla ad haboker, all night long until the morning, until the sun rises. What eshem mizbeach tukad bo, and the fire of the altar shall burn along with it. Okay, so basically, if you bring a burnt offering, it's burnt all night long. Okay, and then it gives details. So it now says that the Kohen has to, and this is not talking about the Kohen Gadol. It's talking about just a Kohen Mina Shura. How do you say that in English? Just a regular serving Kohen. So he has to put on his. These are usually translated as Levash Kohen Mido. But so this is going to be his cloth robe or his linen robe, and his, how they translate it? Not underpants. They usually say his brickets or something like that. I can't remember, but basically his underpants. Okay, when he does it, okay, I don't want to go into the laws right now, but these are more laws of dealing with the burnt offering, then the grain offering, then the sin offering, then the guilt offering. Okay, and did we skip the peace offering there? Burnt, grain, sin. So it does the peace offering later. Sin, guilt, peace. Okay, so those are the 5. So to sum up there from Leviticus 7, and this was part of our Torah portion this week. Okay, that summarizes the 5 main types of offerings. So let's look at that again. If we go back to Leviticus 1, we have the burnt offering, or as we're calling it, the fully burnt or the Holocaust offering, holy burnt or the Holocaust offering. We have the grain offerings, which part of which are thrown on the altar, on the fire. We have the peace, or what we're calling the communion offerings. We have the sin, the chatat offerings, or the purification offerings, are sometimes translated as purification from sin offerings. And then we have the guilt offerings, the asham. Okay, those are the 5 main types of offerings, the 5 main types of sacrifices that are brought on the altar of sacrifices in the courtyard surrounding the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. Okay, and those are the things. There are some other types as well. Okay, I would say more minor types, but these are the 5 main types. It's the burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. And as you look throughout the Tanakh, pay attention to the type of offering it is. If it says a burnt offering, it says a guilt offering, if it says a sin offering. Okay, these all have different meanings, and they all are related to different actions or results of different actions, and also they have different animals. Okay, so for instance, where is it? The guilt offering. We're not going to find it here. Oh, we would find it here. Guilt offering. So this is an ayah. That's a ram. Okay. And we also have one second here. Okay. Anyway, so each of these different types of offerings have different meanings. They're used in different contexts, and they have different rules. Okay, so that's the main thing I would like to make you all aware of. These 5 main types of offering. Once again, the burnt offering, the burnt or the fully burnt or the Holocaust offering. Number 2, the grain offering, specifically the fire grain offering, the grain offering on which a portion of it is thrown onto the fire. Number 3 is the sin or the purification from sin offering. Number 4 is the I'm sorry. Yeah, number 4 is the, did I skip one? I did skip one. Burnt offering, fire grain offering, peace offering. That's what I skipped. Number 3 is the shlamim, is the peace offering. Number 4 is the chatat, the sin or the purification from sin offering. And number 5 is the asham, the guilt offering. Okay, so pay attention to the different types of offerings throughout the Tanakh. They're mentioned many, many times that are being offered, and try to get the sense of the context in which each of these offerings are being brought. And if I can get that through today, even though we only did 1 chapter, then I feel like we accomplished a lot today, rather than just reading through a zillion miles an hour. This is the laws of the sin offering. This is the law of the Yasham, blah blah blah, and it's meaningless to everybody. It doesn't have any deep meaning. It doesn't have any context. Again, when we're reading these parts of the Torah, what we want to be doing, in my opinion, is we want to be examining the system, the overall system, and we want to be examining the different, how the structure of that system is laid out. And if you do that, even if you do it piece by piece over many, many years, you're gonna get an idea of this beautiful system that was set up to allow Israel, to allow the people of Israel to basically interact with Yahweh through this medium of animal or grain fire sacrifices. Okay, whether this has relevance to the end of days is a whole different story. Okay, but certainly in ancient times, where the typical way that people communicated with their God, at least in the Near East, in the Middle East, was through bringing meat sacrifices or grain sacrifices. Okay, so the same thing was instituted for Israel. I'm not going to get into a discussion now as to whether it has relevance in the future. I have my own opinions on that, and they're not only just my opinions. There are other people who hold similar opinions. But certainly in ancient times, this was the main way, or one of the main ways, that a nation would interact with their gods. They would ask for forgiveness. They would say thank you. All the typical communication that you would have between, let's say, a servant and his master, or between a subject and a king and a subject. This was accomplished through the sacrificial system. This is the way Israel communicated these thoughts. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I sinned. I did realize it, but I want to say I'm sorry. I thank you for the great things you've done. I just want to celebrate a holiday today. These were all done through the medium of the meat, or also in the case of chapter 2, the grain fire sacrifices. They were done in the medium, I'll say, of the fire sacrifices. The sacrifices, part of which, or all of which, are thrown onto the altar of sacrifice, onto the burning fire, onto the pyre. Okay, so with that, we're going to end. We've been going at it now for 3.5 hours. I'm going to put up some music. I would have liked to have gotten maybe to the Haftarah a little bit. I'll look at one thing here. So Isaiah 25:8, which is of course famous. Let's take a look at it for a second. Back here, Isaiah. So this is end of days prophecy. So verse 7. So here, and he will swallow up death forever. Umacha Adonai Yahweh. By the way, notice it says Yehui, proving or showing very strongly. I won't get into it right now. That Yud He Waw He is not to be pronounced as Yehovah, as a certain quasi-Karaite says, a certain Christian-leaning quasi-Karaite says. But this clearly shows that, without getting into depth, this clearly shows that it's the vowels of Adonai and Elohim. Adonai, Elohim. That's the way it would be read in synagogues. Here it's the vowels of Elohim. I won't get into it right now. Okay, dima me al kol panim. So he's gonna erase tears from every face. V'cherpat amo yasir, and he will remove the disgrace of his people. Min al kol haaretz, from the entire world. He Yahweh diber, because Yahweh has spoken. That's the verse you wanted me to look at. That was 25:8 specifically. In 9, B'mar biyomahu, Amar biyomahu, Hine Elohenu ze kivinu lo. So and he will say, or people will say on that day, Hine Elohenu ze kivinu lo. This, behold, here is the God we have hoped for, we have waited for, Yoshienu, and he will save us. Ze Yahweh, this is Yahweh. Kivinu lo, we've waited for him. Narila v'nismacha b'yeshuato, we will rejoice and we will be happy in his salvation. Okay, I'm not sure what your point is, Eitan Avior, but that's a beautiful way to end the Torah study. And I hope it's been clear. I hope I've been able to do what sadly is not often done when these chapters are studied, which is to make it interesting, to make it compelling, to make it even fascinating, and to make it so that's relevant, so that we see how this system comes together to form a means of communication between Israel the servant and Yahweh the master. Okay? All right. Any final questions? Any final comments from the audience? Anybody? They do good work. Thank you. I try. My heart is in it, that's for sure. If I didn't have to work a stupid day job, I'd be doing this all day long and all night long. But that's life. We live in the real world. All right. Deuteronomy 4:29, Jeremiah 29:13. Okay. Let's check it out real quickly. Deuteronomy 4:29. You know, it's good that I have to work a day job, because because my monetary sustenance doesn't come from Torah, it allows me to be very independent. I'm beholden to no one, right? I don't have to rely on donations, or I ask for donations, but I don't rely on that. You know, I don't have to worry about, oh, if I say such and such, a big donor such and such is going to stop donating money, because I don't have any big donors. If you'd like to be the first, then we'll talk, but it's got to be no strings attached. All right, Deuteronomy 4:29. כי תוליד בנים ובני בנות ונשנתם בארץ ואיש חתם ועשיתם פסל תמונה ועשיתם רע בעיני יהוה אלוהיך להכיסו ותהי בכם היום את השמיים ואת הארץ. Okay, it's Yahweh אתכם בעמים. Okay, fine. Right, so this goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning, at my monologue. Yahweh will scatter you, speaking to Israel, Ba'amim, among the peoples, meaning into the diaspora, and you will remain few in number, Bagoyim, among the nations, Asher Yinaheg Yahweh etchem shama, that Yahweh will drive you, Yahweh will force you there, or drive you there. Okay? V'varatem sham Elohim ma'aseh yadei Adam, and there you will serve gods that are Masei Yadei Adam, that are gods that are the works of the hands of man. It's Evan, made of wood and stone. Asher lo yirun, velo yishma'un, velo yochlun, velo yirichun, that do not see and do not hear and do not eat and do not smell. Okay, very good. So that gets back, I think, what Eitan Avior is trying to say there is that's getting back to the idea of God eating the sacrifices, right? He doesn't literally eat the sacrifices. All right, let's end here. Thank you all for joining us, for joining me here at the Torah study for the World Alliance of Qara'im. Do all that stuff that everyone says at the end of their videos, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Let's get the word out. I really want this Torah study to grow in exponentially. So please, tell everyone you can about the Torah study, and let's really try to get the numbers up. I really think it's important. I think the time is ripe for the nation of Israel and the world at large to hear what Karaism, what true Torah, what true Tanakh has to say. So please, let's all get the word out. Let's do our part to get the word out. And Be'ezrat Yahweh, we will see you all again next week. We'll go out with some music as usual. And I thank you. This has been Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im with the weekly Torah study. Let's go out with some music.
עזרי עם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 אוי, שיר למעלות, אשא עיני אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, ושיר